أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى وصحبه وسلم. So Aziz sent me an email a few weeks ago to say, do you want to do 3 hadith or 4 hadith? And I remember laughing when he sent it, because the 15th hadith I remember teaching a 1-day course on and still not covering everything that I wanted to cover. So when he said, do you want 3 or 4 hadith, I just thought, well, one of them is the 15th hadith, which could take me 3 or 4 hours. The 16th hadith, I think that will take maybe 4 hours. And the 17th hadith, I think maybe I could do that in less than 4, maybe 3 hours. So I said, okay, let's stick to try and do 3 hadith and not 4, because these are really important hadith. Not that the other hadith are not important, but sometimes when you're studying a book like this, people don't always appreciate how much material is in so few words. And one of the things that Shaykh Afifuddin said last time that really struck me, and alhamdulillah I've had the opportunity to study this book with many people, and we just got a taster last time, but one of the things he said was that this book is the foundation of knowledge among the ulama, and if your foundation is strong, then the rest will be built easily. And it's just made so much sense about how important these 40 hadith are, and that if you understood each of these hadith in depth, everything else becomes so much easier. Whereas if you just have a very superficial understanding of the 40 hadith, then you don't really, sometimes I wonder what are people getting just by going through it so quickly. So that made me think when I heard when Ahmad, every time Ahmad writes to me, he makes me smile for some reason. Maybe it's just Ahmad's intention, but alhamdulillah, that was one thing that came to my mind. So inshallah I'll try my best. But what I did want to talk about with this 15th, the hadith number 15th, is to talk about the classification of speech, to talk about what the Quran says about speech, what the hadith says about speech, talk a little bit about what the ulama and the earlier generations have said about speaking. Then I wanted to talk a little bit about what are the afat al-lisan. How do you say afat al-lisan in English?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Tribulations of the tongue, or something like tests of the tongue. Oh, anyway, we'll use that for now. We'll get a better translation later. Sorry? Calamities of the tongue. That sounds good as well. Calamities of the tongue, afat al-lisan. So the calamities of the tongue, what are they? And of course, this is only part of the hadith we've covered so far. And then read about neighbours, what the Quran says about neighbours, what the hadith says about neighbours, what are the rights of neighbours, how do you define who your neighbours are, and then to talk about guests, and what are the rights of the guests. And if we've covered all of that, then we've covered the first hadith that we're studying today. So that's my plan for the first, say, 50 minutes. Inshallah, we'll try. So it says, Al-Hadith Al-Khamis Ashar, the 15th hadith, عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت ومن كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليكرم جاره ومن كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليكرم ضيفه. So the first translation is that Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu reported that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, let whosoever believes in Allah and in the last day either speak good or be silent. Let whoever so believes in Allah and the last day honor his neighbor. Let whosoever believes in Allah and in the last day honor his guest. So the first thing that stands out here is that these actions are connected to faith. And so we could go back to the earlier hadith, one of the first hadith that we studied, which the ulama have said is the Sunnah, or Asas Sunnah. When we say Sunnah, the mother of the Sunnah, everything comes from it. And in that we talked about, which hadith? one of the hadith that we've studied so far. We've only studied 14 so far. It's a good job I didn't make you memorize them, isn't it? Ladies? Sorry? That's not in the book. That's the first hadith we studied, but it was not in the book. It's called the hadith of Sunnah because it's the hadith in which all of the Sunnah originates. And if you understand this hadith, you understand the whole of the Sunnah. Because in that hadith, Jibreel says to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Akhbirni anil Islam." Tell me what Islam is. "Akhbirni anil Iman." Tell me what Iman is. "Akhbirni anil Ihsan." Tell me what Ihsan is. And then he tells me "Akhbirni anil Sa'ah." Tell me when is the final hour. Tell me what the signs of that final hour are. And then at the end of it, he says, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam turns to Sayyidina Umar. He says, "Ya Umar, atadri man as-sa'il?" Oh Umar, do you know who the person that asked those questions is? And Umar says, "Allah wa Rasuluhu a'lam." Allah and His Messenger know best. He said, "Innahu Jibreel atakum yu'allimukum dinakum." That was Jibreel. He came to teach you your religion in that hadith. So that's why that hadith encompasses everything. And the reason it's called Umm Sunnah, in the way that the al-Quran is the Fatiha, every verse in the Quran is an explanation of the Fatiha. And the Fatiha is a summary of the whole Quran. Every verse. Every single verse. So you can pick any verse in the Quran. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykum as-siyam kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. Oh, you who believe, prescribed for you is fasting as it's been prescribed for those who came before you. This is an explanation of the meaning of Iyyaka na'budu. You do we worship. And also it's an explanation of the verse Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim. The path of which you blessed are the people that you blessed. Who are the people you blessed? The people that came before. So this verse relates to that. Any verse, Qul huwallahu ahad. What's this an explanation of? Where Allah says, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. He's one. Every single verse relates to the Fatiha, and the Fatiha summarizes every verse. In the same way that this hadith, the hadith of Jibreel, summarizes everything in the Sunnah. You want to know about how to cut your nails, for example? It's in there. Because part of the Islam is the Tahara related to the Salah. Aqim as-Salah, establish the Salah. Establishing the Salah means establishing not just praying, but the things that are related to prayer, which includes Tahara, cleanliness. The hadith about being kind to your neighbours, it's part of Ihsan. So every hadith that you're going to come across will relate back to that. So in that hadith, marhaba, how are you? In that hadith, you good? Alhamdulillah, in that hadith, there are separate questions about Iman and Islam. There are questions about what is Islam and what is Iman. And these are important concepts in that hadith that we talked about. And it's made clear again here that we said in that hadith that there is a difference between Iman and Islam. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ was asked these questions in this way. Is that, and what this means is that you separate the concept of faith from the concept of action. In some way they're different. They're similar, but in many ways they're different. And this is why that hadith mentions that Islam is active, is to do it. And tashhadu, and to bear witness. Not to believe, but to bear witness, to actually say it. To pray, to establish the prayer, which is physical. To give the zakat, they're all active verbs. Whereas the other one says, and tu'min billah, to believe in Allah, which is an internal thing. So your belief is that which is inside you. And you can't tell somebody's belief just by looking at them. However, what you can tell, like one of the brothers just asking me, I think you like football. Okay? Why? Because I have a beard? Does that mean every person that has a beard must like football? There must have been something which implies that, and that's to do with your outward form. And the outward form is a manifestation of that which was inside. So your belief, if you do have belief, it will show in your actions. It should show in your actions. And that's why in this hadith it says, "Man kana yu'min billah," whoever does believe in Allah, then they will act. Whoever believes will act. Whoever believes will act. And he repeats this 3 times, going back to that concept of there's a difference between Iman and Islam, and that's important for us because in some ways we need sometimes to define what a Muslim is. In certain circumstances we need to define what a Muslim is because the law relates to that definition in some circumstances. And that's why it has a legal aspect, but it also has a community aspect of how people relate to each other in terms of their etiquette towards each other. And I gave you the example that when people have the idea that Iman and Islam are the same thing, they end up with problems. Why? There is a group, historically, who are called the Khawarij. And this group, the Khawarij, they historically caused a lot of damage to the Muslim Ummah. And the reason why they caused a lot of damage was because of one of their misguided beliefs. Their main misguided belief was that belief and action are the same thing. Belief and action are the same thing. So if you do bad things, you don't believe. So therefore, if you've done a bad action, you're out of Islam. So anybody that makes a mistake, khalas, he's not a Muslim. Khalas, he's not a Muslim. Khalas, he's not a Muslim. And eventually what happens is that everyone becomes non-Muslim. Now the reason why I said historically, this trend has crept back historically over time. Every few generations it comes back. And it has come back in attitude in this generation. And we need to be careful not to make that mistake where we make these kind of judgments about people based on Iman and Islam. If somebody makes a mistake, they make a mistake. If somebody's made a mistake, they've made a mistake. You don't condemn them as being out of Islam because they've made a mistake. And if we have that attitude, we have more understanding of how society functions. So that's why understanding Iman and Islam is important. And I gave the example, we were talking about this earlier in the week, where I remember there was one of these young, I'm kind of tempted to say young punks, but that wouldn't be appropriate because this is a mosque and we don't go around calling people young punks, even if they are. So one of these young men whose beard was almost down to his knees, to prove what a good Muslim he is, I'm just saying that. And his trousers were just above his knees. So that again proves what a good Muslim is, because he kind of went on a campaign, a crusade, that he thought everybody was not good enough for his Islam. Weren't as good in Islam as he was. And he was working in a Muslim school where the Imam didn't have a beard down to his knees, and he wore a tie. You know, this is an Imam with a tie. Can you imagine? He works in a Muslim school with a tie. So this young brother, he didn't approve of the Imam, and he was just waiting for the Imam to make a mistake so he could condemn him as being out of Islam. So he attended his khutbah, and the Imam said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was Sayyid al-Shuhada, he's a really passionate Sudanese Imam, and he had this kind of way of speaking, who was Sayyid al-Shuhada, which means the master of the martyrs, which is actually the title which most people give to. When you say Sayyid al-Shuhada, who do you usually refer to? Sayyidina Hamza. Sayyid al-Shuhada is usually called Sayyidina Hamza, not the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In fact, to say he's Sayyid al-Shuhada, it implies that he died as a martyr. So here, it's kind of theologically and historically, we're not quite sure whether he's right, the Imam. He is right, by the way. And the reason why he's right is because the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ana Sayyid walad Adam wala fakhr." I am the master of all people. And that's not a boast. Meaning I'm the master of the shuhada and the non-shuhada. I'm the master of the men and the women. I'm the master of the red and the black. I'm the master of everybody, and I'm not boasting. So he is Sayyid al-Shuhada. Linguistically, that's a correct definition. Also, he died as a result of poisoning, which is the sabab of his death was that he was poisoned a few months before dying, and he went into fever and became ill a few days before, several weeks before dying. And so technically, that's another reason. So he's not wrong. It's just it's not the done thing. It wasn't the conventional way. So then he went and announced that the Imam is out of Islam because he gave a khutbah which was wrong. Can you imagine the fitna that this caused in the community? Where he's going around spreading stories, this Imam is no good, this and people were so confused. But the basic element of what was wrong was that he didn't understand the relationship between Iman and Islam, between action and faith. And that's why it's important. Marhaba, mashallah, wa alaikum salam, munawwara. So, if we understand this, alhamdulillah, inshallah, it will help us in our own dealings with ourselves, but it will also help us on how this society functions. Because if you don't understand it, the society will go astray. And it has in many cases. But also, the three things that are being mentioned are all to do with society. And in fact, the three hadith that we're going to study today are all to... The reason why they're so important is because they're all to do with interaction. They're all to do with how we behave. So he says, وَمَنْ كَانَ يُؤْمِنْ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَلْيَقُولْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لَيَصْمُتْ. Whoever believes in the last day, so whoever has belief, should act in the following way. So here, he's actually explaining by the use of the fal, yaqul. For those people that understand the grammar, the fal, the fa is and so, or as a consequence of the first, the second should happen. The lam is for ta'keed. And so he should definitely do this. If, for example, if I were to say, if you're a Muslim, you'd behave nicely. Isn't that a simple thing to say? But if you think about what it's saying, it's quite profound. If you were a man, I'm not going to say anything about football now, am I? Okay? Because it's too heavy now. If I'm talking now I'm talking something serious. I'm saying, if you were a real man, what would I say now? What's the end of my sentence? Don't say he's going to support Netherlands, all right? Just don't say that. If you were a real man, finish the sentence for me. And I'm sure the sisters are going to say something different to the brothers. Okay? If you were a real man, you would have been able to pump 60 bench presses. No, that's not what I'm going to say. If you were a real man, then this is how you would have behaved. For example, the Prophet ﷺ did speak like that. He says a real man behaves kindly to his wife, for example. So here, if you are, then. It's a really strong construction. So if you believe in the last day, then you will do the following. You will speak well. You will say good things, or you'll keep silent. So here it implies there's only two options for a believer. He either says good things, or he doesn't say anything at all. But in reality, there are 4 types of speech. 2 of them are mentioned here. Okay, you can either have speech which is darar mahd, is completely dangerous. Okay, it's always harmful. Or you could have speech which is arba, darar mahd wa nafa'u mahd, and that which has benefit in it and which has harm in it. So that's the second type. So the first is is harmful speech, and then there's that which has darar wa manfa', that which has harm and benefit, and then there is that which has la darar wa la manfa', has no benefit and no harm, and then there is that which has benefit, and no harm. Is that right? Have I given 4 categories? Right, in each one of these 4, you need to think, where do I stand with these? And also think, do I use these all 4? Is there speech that I've used which has been harmful? Is there speech that I've used that is harmful and beneficial? And is there speech that's just no benefit and no harm? And inshallah there's plenty of speech which is useful. So that last category is the beneficial speech, is the speech of the true believer. He speaks well. If there's something beneficial, he speaks. And does anyone know Shaykh Ibrahim Asiefa? There's some speeches that he's given on I've seen on YouTube. Have you seen them?
Some
He's kind of fiery, isn't he? But does anyone actually know him? He doesn't speak. As a person, Shaykh Ibrahim hardly ever speaks. He's big, he's strong. I mean, he's like he's a real man. You know, he's built like a real man, he looks like a real man, and he behaves like a real man. He is, for me, the archetypal man. But he doesn't speak. You know, he just smiles. And he says very, very few words. And then somehow he sits here and he has to give a talk. And it's like a tap is turned on. And then he just pours out, and he's like fiery, and he's passionate, and he's got knowledge that you can't. Where did he get that from? He's got Quran and Hadith and stories, and it just ties in, and it's all logical, and it's got a pattern that starts here, and then the tap just finishes, and it just goes, and it's over. It's like a storm. Listening to him is like a storm. It's just watching him is unbelievable. And that's, for whenever I read this hadith, I always think of Shaykh Ibrahim Asiefa, because he's silent, or he's speaking. And if he speaks, you listen. But also, there's one side of him that very, very few people see. Very, very few people see, because he doesn't let people see it. Is sometimes he relaxes. Honestly. I saw him in 2009. I saw him relax. We were in Wales with Sidi Yahya and 5 or 6 other brothers. We were just chilling, and it was so much fun. He just cracking jokes. And then I realized that there is more to speech, because when I saw him, and I'd known him for 10 years before this, but I'd never heard him joke, except a clever joke, you know, not just like talking about football or just general stuff. And he did. But this speech was different, because it didn't have outward benefit. It didn't have outward benefit, but it did have benefit. Because the people that were there were all people who had been very intense during that day. During the morning we'd had a 4-hour session with Habib Kadhim in Arabic. And then each one of us had given a lecture for 1 hour. And then Habib Kadhim came on, and then he spoke again, and we had to translate for him. And then there was a bit of a break. And then we went away, and we sat, and it was a chance to relax. And Shaykh Ibrahim just made everybody feel comfortable by just chilling out. He put his feet out, and he just relaxed. So here, it showed there was a different kind of speech. So, as far as speech is concerned, you need to think about your speech. What are you saying? And what category does your speech fall under? So the first category, where it's harmful. This, you have to have silence over. فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرٍ, you should speak well. أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. The first category, you should always be silent. That which is damaging should always be silent. That which has benefit and harm. That which has benefit and harm. Give an example. Can you give me an example? Think about this. Which might have some benefit, but might have some harm in it.
If someone does something wrong and you try to correct him, but you do it in a bad manner.
Okay, good. So you're saying something, but to correct somebody's done something wrong, and you go and tell them off. But you tell them off in such a way that you actually harm them. So it's harmful, but it's beneficial. So there's some good and some bad. Any other examples? An example might be, I'm not saying that maybe Shaykh Ibrahim's example wouldn't be a good one, but one of the brothers wrote to me and he said, is it okay to invite the brothers around to my flat for pizza and television? That was his question. I thought, why do people ask me strange questions? Why don't they? I mean, I'm sure nobody asks Shaykh Ibrahim questions like that. They only ask him fiqh questions, hadith questions. What's the meaning of this hadith? What's the meaning? They ask me stupid questions like that. Okay. What I understood from that was that the guys that he was planning to invite, they wouldn't come round to his house for darsa. There wouldn't be a dars. If he invited them to a dars, they wouldn't come to his house. They would go out to the pub or to the union at the university. That's probably what they were doing, what they would do. And he meant that if I invited them to the house for pizza, football, talk, just general, we could spend all night, they could stay until Fajr. But at least they wouldn't be going to somewhere which is haram. So that was his intention. So he wanted to know, am I doing something bad by inviting these guys around and not doing anything useful? Just kind of wasting time. So here, perhaps that might be some of the speech might be falling into this category. There's some benefit in it, but there's some harm. So, or it might fall under the third category, which is there's no benefit and no harm. So it's probably one of these two categories, certainly. Right, in the first case, which is where it's harmful and there's no benefit, khalas, sumt. Your choice should be silence. Second category, where some benefit and some harm, the preference, according to this hadith, فَلْيَكُلْ خَيْرٌ أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. You should prefer to be silent. So if there's some benefit in it, going back to the example, it would probably be best if he didn't say anything. The example you gave, it would probably be best if he didn't say anything. So if he's going to drive somebody away, he might actually increase his inad. If he's doing bad, and then you tell him off, and yazidu inadan. Stubbornness, yeah. I'm glad he's here, because my English is gone. Harban, yesterday I was trying to think of a word in English, and I could think of it in Afrikaans, I could think of it in French, I could think of it in Spanish, I could think of it in Arabic, I just couldn't remember the word in English. So I might need your help today, because my head is a bit messed up. Okay, so World Cup, I blame. Okay, so here you might increase him in stubbornness by telling him off. Okay? So it's better not to say anything. So usually, way up, is there benefit and good? And usually, in this case, it's better to be silent. And then the third category is the same. Because usually if there's no benefit and there's no good, then usually, it's better not to do it. Because it just wastes time. And wasting time is not a good thing. Why? Because it's limited. Our lifespan is limited, and we can't really spend our time wasting. We haven't got time to waste. And in addition, there's Imam al-Ghazali has a beautiful description of all of the reasons why you shouldn't speak too much. And it's like a page and a half long, and they're all really kind of high level, intellectual, philosophical and deep hadith and Quran. And right towards the end, and he says, and the least you should remember is Yawm al-Qiyamah. Every single word that you say is going to be taken into account. And can you imagine the queues behind you? Have you ever been in a shopping centre, in a shopping mall, where you can't find your wallet, or that you're stumbling, or something is broken and they've got to go and get, and there's a big queue, and everyone's waiting, just hurry up. How annoyed everybody is. He says, that's what you're going to be like Yawm al-Qiyamah, because you talk too much. And it just brings to mind Yawm al-Qiyamah, this long queue like at Netto. And all these people, just get on with it, we want to get to Jahannam. Because every single word that you speak will be taken into account. So if you speak unnecessarily, you're going to have to answer for unnecessary things. So just don't rack up such a large account. And then of course the other category is, okay, so that's the types of speeches. Now in the Quran talks about speech a lot. And of course the one is the one that I've just mentioned, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَا يَلْفِظُ مِنْ قَوْلٍ إِلَّا لَدَيْهِ رَقِيبٌ عَتِيدٌ. He says there is no speech that you utter except that it will be written down by two angels, رَقِيبٌ عَتِيدٌ, which could mean that these are the names of the angels, or it could, as it appears, is that they are angels who are accounting and keeping an eye on you, which is that what Raqib and Atid means. So this is one of the verses. And then another verse which relates to what we've just talked about, speech, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَمْحُ اللَّهُ مَا يَشَاءُ وَيُثْبِتُ وَعِنْدَهُ أُمُّ الْكِتَابِ. One of the interpretations of this verse is, according to Ibn Abbas, it relates to your speech, that everything that you do or think has been accounted for, but it doesn't take place or doesn't come into your account unless you actually say it. So there is speech which comes to your mind, hadith al-nafs, as we say in Arabic. You think about something, but you don't act upon it. You don't actually say it. So you think, for example, yeah, that guy was a young punk, and I shouldn't have said that, should I? Because it would have been better just to think it but not say it. But I really wanted you to know how I felt about this, that attitude, the way people behave, because I think he's a young punk. Alhamdulillah, may Allah has made him, inshallah, one of the less punkish and not young anymore. Alhamdulillah. So, but there are things that you might want to say, but you don't. And Allah will wipe that out from your account. In other words, you won't be taken to account for that thought or that hadith al-nafs. So here, the sumt that's being mentioned, the silence that's being mentioned in the hadith, is to do with controlling yourself. And that's very important when we come to the next hadith about control, because the hadith 16 is about anger. And anger is something which everybody feels, and if you don't, you're not a real man. And I'm quoting Imam al-Shafi'i. Imam al-Shafi'i says he's not a man if he can't get angry. But we'll come to that when we do that hadith. But the hadith talks about not getting angry. And it's being able to control the anger. And in this hadith, being able to control the speech. So controlling your speech is what it's about. So that's what the Quran says. And of course there are things which are mentioned in the hadith as well, where the Prophet ﷺ said, for example, Aswad ibn Asram al-Muharibi, this companion, came to the Prophet ﷺ and he says, قَالَ قُلْتُ يَا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ أَوْصِينِي, O Messenger of Allah, give me some advice. And he says, هَلْ تَمْلَكْ لِسَانَكَ, can you control your tongue? And he says, مَا أَمْلَكْ إِلَّا إِذَا لَمْ أَمْلَكْ لِسَانِي. He says, if I don't own my tongue, actually if you listen to the words exactly, do you own your tongue? That's the literal translation, isn't it? Do you own your tongue? He says, if I don't own my tongue, what do I own? Good. He says, فَقَالَ هَلْ تَمْلَكْ يَدَكَ, do you own your hand? He says, if I don't own my hand, what do I own? He says, فَلَا تَكُلْ بِلِسَانِكَ إِلَّا مَعْرُوفًا, don't say anything with your tongue except that which is good. وَلَا تَبْسِطْ يَدَكَ إِلَّا إِلَى خَيْرٍ, and don't stretch out your hand except to do good. That's my advice. And then he also said, the Prophet ﷺ said, مَنْ صَمَتَ نَجَى, Whoever is silent is safe. Beautiful phrase. If you think about it, safe. He succeeds. He's safe from what? What are you safe from if you're silent? Mm-hmm.
Bad speech.
Sorry? Bad speech?
That's not beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not going to be taken into account for bad speech. Also, if you're silent, then you're not likely to get into many fights. You're also not likely to make any mistakes. You're safe. And if you don't say anything, you're not going to upset anybody. So it's probably best to stay silent most of the time. Man samata naja. And of course, it has to be balanced against other things, like enjoining right and forbidding evil. And then the Prophet ﷺ says, "Inna ahadakum liyatakallam bi kalimatin min ridwan Allah ma yadhunnu anna tablagha ma balagat." فَيُكْتَبُ اللَّهُ بِهِ رِضْوَانُهُ إِلَى يَوْمِ يَلْقَاهُ. He says that somebody might say a word. إِنَّ أَحَدُكُمْ لِيَتَكَلَّمْ بِكَلِمَةٍ. He might say a word which pleases Allah, and he doesn't know what the consequences of that will be, such that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will write down His pleasure until He meets him. Now that's what that means is that sometimes you speak and you don't even know what you've said. And one of the things that, an example, a personal experience that relates to this, is there was once somebody wrote to me after I'd been in contact with this lady for some months, on and off. She'd been writing to me for some time, on and off, for a few years. And then after a few years, alhamdulillah, her life had changed quite a lot over these years. And she said that there was one day that my life changed completely. She told somebody else and asked to indicate to me that one day her life changed completely. And it was when something happened. I was giving a talk. I gave a talk. It was a big talk and just loads. I talk a load of nonsense most of the time. So I gave this talk. Probably spoke a load of nonsense, and she didn't understand. But afterwards, in the car park, she came up to me as I was getting into the car. As sometimes crazy women do, and came up and says, "I write poetry." Well, what do you do if a woman comes up to you and says, "I write poetry"? What would you say? Big deal. Shut up. Go away. Huh? Sorry, I should have said that, should I? Apparently, what I said, I don't even know. I said, "MashaAllah," and I got in the car and left. That's kind of a non-committal answer, isn't it? That's kind of a not very. It's not going to get me into trouble, is it, Sarah? No, I'm not going to get into trouble for saying "MashaAllah." But she said that word, that one thing, changed her life in a way that she'd never. She'd been to lectures. She'd actually been to my lecture. And as I said, I probably spoke a load of nonsense in there, but that one, mashallah, she said, changed her life. And she explained a bit later on what had happened was that she'd been in a hospital on and off since she was 11 years old with a serious eating disorder, to the extent that she was actually in a straitjacket at one point. In a straitjacket is where they basically tie you up, and she was very, very seriously ill. Because the level of self-harm was the only way that they could stop her from, tearing up her skin, was by actually strapping her into a jacket so she couldn't harm herself. And she spent most of her youth in hospitals, in several, so serious that she'd actually been moved from that country where she was living to another country where they were more expert in treating this kind of disorder. And as the time had progressed, she actually said that was the first time in her life, somebody who was from the Muslim kind of community, her family, or had showed any, what she said, positive praise. She said her parents had never, ever said anything positive about her. And that's why that was part of her illness, was that she'd never been treated well by her parents. And that one word, apparently, she said it was that point that her life changed, and that she turned to think that actually Muslims are not as bad as I thought they were. And then she started to show an interest in Islam. And by showing an interest in Islam, she started to study a bit more about Islam. And she found out that actually Islam's a nice religion. It's not a mean, horrible religion like she thought. And then when she started to think it wasn't a mean, horrible, nasty religion, she started to actually enjoy it and practice it. And as she started to practice her religion, she actually grew as a person to the extent that she could then deal with everything else. And she didn't have the psychological difficulties that she had. And on top of that, she didn't feel bad about writing poetry or painting. And she actually started to show people her poetry and her paintings. And she actually started to develop quite a reputation as a bit of a poet and a painter. And then she started being shown as a role model to other girls in terms of painting, that you can become a painter if, here's a good Muslim painter. Why don't you become a painter? So she started to boost herself, and on top of that she started to help other girls, and so she was starting to strengthen. And then she realized that this is how Muslims should behave towards other people. She said all of that took about because somebody said, MashaAllah. And I just think, I wish I knew how important words were. Because that one word, if it could have had that much effect, then I would have been better in my speech. Because then I could have maybe really had an effect on her. So you don't know how great simple words can be to somebody. So he says it might be that you say something which is from Ridwanullah, that pleases Allah, that it will continue to be written down until Yawm al-Qiyamah. And then the Prophet continues, وَإِنْ أَحَدُكُمْ, and there is one of you, لِيَتَكَلَّمْ بِكَلِمَةٍ مِنْ سَخَطِ اللَّهِ, that you say a word which is from the anger of Allah, that angers Him. وَمَا يَظَنَّ أَن تَبْلُغُ مَا بَلَغَتْ, you won't even know how far it will go. فَيَكْتُبُ اللَّهُ بِهَا سَخَطَهُ إِلَى يَوْمِ يَلْقَاهُ, until it will be written down as angering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until the day you meet Him. For the rest of your life, it will be written down. He said this. He said this. And some of the scholars say that it will be there'll be an angel who just continually writes that word down that you said, because you said one bad word. One bad word. You can just think just for half a minute about your life. You think about one word that you might have said that might still be written down because of the damage that it's caused. That's what the Prophet ﷺ said. And then in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, "La yastaqimu iman abdin," that a slave's faith will not be constant, will not be firm, will not be upright, hatta yastaqim qalbahu, until his heart is firm, until his heart is right. So your faith isn't right unless your heart is right. وَلَا يَسْتَقِيمُ قَلْبَهُ, but his heart will not be right حَتَّى يَسْتَقِيمُ لِسَانَهُ, until his tongue is right. So your heart won't be right until your tongue is right. And for the Prophet ﷺ to say, just think about these three hadith. It's enormous. Your faith isn't complete according to the hadith we're studying. If you believe you'll do this, that means if you don't do that, you don't believe. That's what it implies. The other hadith about you might be having this written down forever because of one bad word that you didn't even know what you said. It just came out. Just came out. And your iman will not be straight, will not be upright until your heart is upright, and your heart will not be upright until you control your tongue. These are heavy hadith. So we said we'd talk about Hadith, we'll talk about the Quran. And we'll talk a little about some of the another hadith, for example. The Prophet ﷺ says, "Ala anbi'akum bi amrayn khafifayn lam yaliq Allah bimithlihima." He says, should I teach you two little things? Should I teach you about two little things? Should I tell you about two little things that, or two light things that Allah has given, which there's nothing like? He says, as-sumt wa husn al-khuluq, silence and good character. And then I said I'd talk a little bit about some of the earlier scholars have said. Dhunun al-Masri, for example, he says, "Ahsan an-nas li nafsi amlakahum li lisanihi." The best person, the person who is best towards other people, is the one who controls his tongue. Again, it goes back to how you are with your community, with your society, with your family. If you can control your tongue, you're going to be good to everybody. If you can't control your tongue, you're going to damage everything. And it's not good enough just to say, "I was only joking," which is the usual excuse, isn't it? It's just a joke. Can't take a joke? It's better you didn't say it. Luqman alayhi salam said, "Qala Luqman li ibnihi, ya bunayya, idha iftakhara an-nas alayka bi husni kalamihim, faftakhir anta bi husni sumtik." He says, if people boast about how good they are at speaking, you, my son, you boast about how good you are to being silent. Oh, sorry, not boast. Boast is the wrong word. Take pride. If people take pride in how well they speak, you, my son, you should take pride in how good you are in silence. SubhanAllah. How good are we in silence? How good are we in silence? One of the scholars said, do you want me to teach you all the knowledge of the knowledgeable, or the ilm al-ulama, the wisdom of the wise ones, and all of the medicine of the doctors? Shall I? Shall I teach you the ilm al-ulama, hikmat al-hukama, wa tibb al-atibba? Do you want me to teach you that? Because break time now, isn't it? Or shall I teach you those three things before? He says, okay, I'll teach you the ilm al-ulama. He says, أما العلم العلماء فإذا سئلت أما لا تعلم فقل لا أعلم. The ilm of the ulama is that if you don't know, say Allahu A'lam. Now you've got all of the knowledge of the ulama. Okay? So if you know what it is, say it. And if you don't, you say Allahu A'lam. And this is really the ilm al-ulama. You know, do you know Yahya bin Yahya al-Laythi? He's like one of the most famous students of Imam Malik. He came from Andalusia. He came from Spain to Al-Madinah. He travelled all that distance. And can you imagine, we're talking of, this is 90 years, 100 years after the Prophet ﷺ. This was not an easy time to travel across North Africa. I mean, it's not an easy time any time to travel across North Africa. But he travelled all that distance. Before he left, he'd written down 39 questions, I think, or 36 questions for Imam Malik. He's travelling from Andalusia to go to the Imam of the world in Al-Madinah Al-Munawwara with 36 questions. And I know how he feels, because I remember the second time I went to Tarim. You're going to Tarim? Oh, you're going to see Al-Habib Umar? Or you're going to see the ulama? Ask him this. Oh, ask him this. Ask him this. And I had to go with a book full of questions. And I remember going there and just going, I said, Habib, is it possible, can I have a little bit of time? I have some questions from the brothers and sisters in Glasgow. And he says, yeah, marhaba. And he gave me like an hour. And we just went through one question, next question. So alhamdulillah, I got most of the questions. And then at the end of it, sorry for sidetracking, but Habib Umar, this is the adab of Habib Umar. He said, not one of those questions was from you, was it? So what do you want to ask me? Ashib. But anyway, so I know how he feels. So Imam al-Layth, he travels all the way across North Africa with 36 questions. And he gets to Imam Malik after all of these months and months of traveling through difficult. He asks him the first question. Imam Malik, Allahu A'lam. Allah knows best. Question number 2, Allahu A'lam. Question number 3, Allahu A'lam. Question number 4, he answers it. Question number 5, Allahu A'lam. Question number 6, Allahu A'lam. Allah knows best. He answers 4 questions. He's travelled all this way and he gets no answers except Allah knows best. Ajib. This is the knowledge of the ulama. Allahu A'lam. Allah knows best. If people really knew that, they would be so much more scholarly. But now, how often do you hear people say Allahu A'lam? Except when they say, this is the answer. He's wrong and he's wrong. He's an idiot. He's an idiot. He's an idiot. He's going to the hellfire. He's kafir. And Allah knows best. That's usually, isn't it? That's usually when people say Allah, that's what they mean. Meaning, I know best and Allah knows that. It's very, very rare when somebody who actually means Allahu A'lam. And this is the knowledge of the ulama. Like one of the earlier generations, not earlier, I mean, he's actually just beyond us. Said Ahmad bin Zayn al-Dahlan. He died like 100 years ago. But I met people who met him, so I can't even consider him. I mean, admittedly, they were in their 90s. But so he used to come out, and he came out to his lesson. He came out. He says, "I'm not prepared. Go home. I'm not prepared. My lesson. Go home." This is in the Masjid al-Haram. He's known as the top alim of the world. And he came out, he says, "I haven't prepared my lesson, you should go home." And one of the scholars said, "But why do you have to prepare the lesson? You wrote the book." He was actually teaching his own book. And he said, "No, I didn't read it today. I didn't read it today." He wrote the book. He knows the book inside out. It's his book. But he said, "I didn't read it today." Meaning that he had, and the reason why Imam Malik had answered, because Imam Malik had answered all of those questions elsewhere. That's why people were surprised. Why did he say Allahu A'lam? And the reason was because he hadn't read it within the last 4 or 5 days. So if he hadn't got the answer direct from the hadith in the last few days, fresh in his mind, he'd rather not say anything. So this is the ilm al-ulama. When you don't know something, you say Allahu A'lam. Now if you've got that, khalas, you're all ulama, go away. Hikmatul hukama, فَإِذَا كُنْتَ جَلِيسُ قَوْمًا, when you're sitting with people, فَكُنْ أَسْكَتُهُمْ, be the most silent of them. When you're sitting with people, speak the least of all of them. فَإِنْ أَصَابُوا, and if what they say is correct and good, كُنْتَ مِنْ جُمْلَتِهِمْ, if what they say is good, you're one of them. You'll be rewarded for everything that they say that's good. Okay? وَإِنْ أَخْطُوا, and if they make mistakes, سَلِمْتَ مِنْ خَطِئِهِمْ, you're safe from their mistakes. You're not counted amongst them. So you want to be wise? Whenever you're with people, be the most silent of all of them. And then I look, yeah, the clever people that I've known in my life, they don't talk much. But when they do talk, you know what they said. When they do talk, you know what they said. And all of the ulama that I know, the big ulama, like for example Shaykh Ibrahim al-Siyafa, he doesn't speak except when it's like when the tap's turned on, khalas, then it just flows. And sometimes I actually concluded maybe it's not him that's speaking, because it's just I don't know. Maybe it's just something happens. Tap turns on, he gets. Somebody else just takes over his body and just he speaks on the, I don't know, it looks like that to me. But outside of that, he doesn't speak. But when he does say something, it's powerful. And then, what was the last thing I said? You've got all of the knowledge of the ulama. You've got all the wisdom of the wise people. Right, what was the last thing I was going to say now that Dr. Saab has just come in? You want to know all of the tip of a tibba, the medicine of all of them. You don't need to go study for 8 years. I can give it you in one sentence. According to this, it says, simple. Don't eat unless you're hungry. Khalas, he said, I've given you everything, now go. You've learned everything you need to know. Don't eat unless you're hungry. Ajib. What time did you say the break was?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. I continue. Alhamdulillah. Okay, because I know Yasin's not here physically, but his presence, you can still feel it. So I don't want to upset him. May Allah give him good health. SubhanAllah. Here's another brother. You know, when he speaks, it means something. But I remember the first time I was late here. You know, I can remember his words exactly. Wow, it was so bang. What did he say? You're late. That's all he said. You're late. Ajib. You see how powerful words can be. It's still, because alhamdulillah, and every time I come here, I'm thinking, am I going to be on time? Am I going to be on time? Am I going to be on time? Because he just said to me, you're late. Because he doesn't say much, but when he does speak, khalas, it matters. And when he jokes, khalas, he's got such a good sense of humor, and he's just such such a great person to be with, because he doesn't speak a great deal. So even when he's silent, he's good fun. He's good to be with. But when he speaks, it's even better. Alhamdulillah. What was I going to say? Okay, Sayyidina Zain al-Abidin. Once he came out to Sayyidina Zain al-Abidin came out to the before that one story, just to go back to that speech and the likes of Shaykh Ibrahim Asiyafa, the likes of Yasin, and the real people who understand this. One of the scholars, Al-Asma'i, he said that somebody had said to him that if you say to me one word, I hear 10. But if you say to me 10 words, I only hear 1. Say that again. If you say to me one word, I hear 10. But if you say to me 10, I only hear 1. He only said 2 words to me. You're late. And I'm still scared. How many months later? 6 months later, and I'm still scared to be late. Because he said, you're late. Ajib. It's not the amount of words that you say. It's sometimes the amount of words you don't say. And sometimes it's, you know, the more you talk, khalas, it's more damaging. In particular when you talk to kids. You need to be careful that when you tell kids off, you use as few words as possible. You use as few words as possible. Because the more words you use, the longer the torment is, so to speak, and the less effective it is. Because all they get is this pain, so to speak, of being told off, but not actually hearing anything. It's like they're being tortured. Whereas if you say a few words, for example, that's not nice. If it's powerful, if you said it in the right context at the right time, that's not nice. It's more powerful than saying, you know, you shouldn't have done that because that's all they hear, and they don't actually. No, that's not nice. It's the same as you're late. Okay, right. I just finished with one last story where Sayyidina Zain al-Abidin, he came out of the mosque, and somebody came to him and started fasabbahu. He started to curse him, and then some of the people around Sayyidina Zain, of course, you know Sayyidina Zain al-Abidin is the great grandson of, he's Ali ibn al-Hussein ibn Fatima Zahra ibn Rasulullah. So great grandson. So he's the great grandson of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So obviously he has a lot of people who love him, and so he's there and he's talking, and they start to get a bit agitated that this man could insult and curse him in such a way, and he just says, no, leave him, let him finish what he's saying. Mahlan, mahlan, he says.
Patience.
Yeah, take it easy, just let him finish, it's okay, don't worry about it. Mahlan. And then he finished and he says, is there anything, and then when the person had finished everything, all of the insults he had, he says, is there anything else? Is there anything else that's upset you? And then he said, no. He said, you sure there's nothing you need? And he says, no. Because he'd let him insult him. And then at the end he says, is everything okay? Is there anything you need? And then at this point, he said everything. He's insulted him, he cursed him, and he says, no. And then he says, just wait a minute. And he went away and he took his black cloak and he says, this is for you. And the man put it on and he says, Wallahi, this is the son of the Prophet ﷺ, and he left. So here, his sumt, the silence of the grandson of the Prophet Sayyidina Ali Zain al-Abidin, the silence was the most powerful tool in dealing with people. And sometimes silence is what's meant, فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرٌ أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ, you should say good or you should stay silent, because sometimes silence is the most powerful tool in dealing with people. And another example, almost exactly the same thing happened with Al-Habib Umar, who we just mentioned, when he went to Sana'a one year. And there was a man stood up and he just was really abusive. And Habib Umar just told him, everyone just let him finish. And he just went on and on and on. At the end of it, he just says, is there anything else? And then he told him, you're welcome to stay if you wish. Or if you wish, I will be happy to come and visit you and talk to you again. And he says, no, it's okay, I'll stay. And he just sat. And he'd finished his rant, and then the Habib just carried on with the dars. The next day the man came to the dars again and he didn't rant. He didn't go on with the Habib Umar. And he just became one of his students. Because he needed to so sometimes what's meant by that is, silence is فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرٌ أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. So you should speak good or you should stay silent. So this leads us to one big question. I said I had a list of things I was going to cover, which was, we were going to talk about classes of speech, Quran and the speech, Hadith of speech, some stories and narrations. There's one story I really should have told you, but I couldn't. It's all about somebody dying under a tree, but we'll leave that another time. And then one of the things was, we have these afat al-lisan. And what did you say they were? Somebody said it. Calamities of the tongue. Okay, we'll stick to that for now. Afat al-lisan, we couldn't get a translation for it. I said tests of the tongue, but so calamities was a better one apparently. No? Yeah, you? Yeah. Because you weren't here, so I was thinking maybe you've got something to add to it. See, this is one of the, you see what I mean? See what I told you about the ulama? Allahu a'lam. Allahu a'lam. It frustrates you, doesn't it? Anyway, right, I want you to list, before we take a break, 5 afat al-lisan, 5 calamities of the tongue, or tests of the tongue, or bad actions of the tongue. I'll give you maybe the first one. Lying. Okay? So 5. You can do it in pairs, triples, I don't care. So give them a few minutes and then we'll count that as a break time. So okay, so break is at 15. We did start 10 minutes late, so he won't be angry with me. You got 5?
No.
You've done 5? Khalas, you can go for break first. I don't know if somebody's got 5 quickly, that means that they know them so well because because it's part of their life, or they know them so well because they've avoided them. May Allah reward you, alhamdulillah. So you can take your break first. It's not going to get me into trouble, is it, Sarah? No, I'm not going to get into trouble for saying mashallah. But she said that word, that one thing, changed her life in a way that she'd been to lectures, she'd actually been to my lecture. And as I said, I probably spoke a load of nonsense in there, but that one, mashallah, she said, changed her life. And she explained a bit later on what had happened was that she'd been in a hospital on and off since she was 11 years old with a serious eating disorder, to the extent that she was actually in a straitjacket at one point. Straitjacket is where they basically tie you up, and she was very, very seriously ill, because the level of self-harm was the only way that they could stop her from tearing up her skin was by actually strapping her into a jacket so she couldn't harm herself. And she spent most of her youth in hospitals, in several, so serious that she'd actually been moved from that country where she was living to another country where they were more expert in treating this kind of disorder. And as the time had progressed, she actually said that was the first time in her life, somebody who was from the Muslim kind of community, her family, or had showed any, what she said, positive praise. She said her parents had never, ever said anything positive about her. And that's why that was part of her illness, was that she'd never been treated well by her parents. And that one word, apparently, she said it was that point that her life changed, and that she turned to think that actually Muslims are not as bad as I thought they were. And then she started to show an interest in Islam. And by showing an interest in Islam, she started to study a bit more about Islam. And she found out that actually Islam's a nice religion. It's not a mean, horrible religion like she thought. And then when she started to think it wasn't a mean, horrible, nasty religion, she started to actually enjoy it and practice it. And as she started to practice her religion, she actually grew as a person to the extent that she could then deal with everything else. And she didn't have the psychological difficulties that she had. And on top of that, she didn't feel bad about writing poetry or painting. And she actually started to show people her poetry and her paintings. And she actually started to develop quite a reputation as a bit of a poet and a painter. And then she started being shown as a role model to other girls in terms of painting, that you can become a painter if, here's a good Muslim painter. Why don't you become a painter? So she started to boost herself, and on top of that she started to help other girls, and so she was starting to strengthen. And then she realized that this is how Muslims should behave towards other people. She said all of that took about because somebody said, MashaAllah. And I just think, I wish I knew how important words were. Because that one word, if it could have had that much effect, then I would have been better in my speech. Because then I could have maybe really had an effect on her. So you don't know how great simple words can be to somebody. So he says it might be that you say something which is from Ridwanullah, that pleases Allah, that it will continue to be written down until Yawm al-Qiyamah. And then the Prophet continues, وَإِنْ أَحَدُكُمْ, and there is one of you, لِيَتَكَلَّمْ بِكَلِمَةٍ مِنْ سَخَطِ اللَّهِ, that you say a word which is from the anger of Allah, that angers Him. وَمَا يَظَنَّ أَن تَبْلُغُ مَا بَلَغَتْ, you won't even know how far it will go. فَيَكْتُبُ اللَّهُ بِهَا سَخَطَهُ إِلَى يَوْمِ يَلْقَاهُ, until it will be written down as angering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until the day you meet Him. For the rest of your life it will be written down. He said this, he said this. And some of the scholars say that it will be there'll be an angel who just continually writes that word down that you said, because you said one bad word. One bad word. You can just think just for half a minute about your life. You think about one word that you might have said that might still be written down because of the damage that it's caused. That's what the Prophet ﷺ said. And then in another hadith the Prophet ﷺ says, لا يستقيم إيمان عبد, that a slave's faith will not be constant, will not be firm, will not be upright, حتى يستقيم قلبه, until his heart is firm, until his heart is right. So your faith isn't right unless your heart is right. ولا يستقيم قلبه, but his heart will not be right حتى يستقيم لسانه, until his tongue is right. So your heart won't be right until your tongue is right. And for the Prophet ﷺ to say, just think about these three words, these three hadith. It's enormous. Your faith isn't complete according to the hadith we're studying. If you believe you'll do this, that means if you don't do that, you don't believe. That's what it implies. The other hadith about you might be having this written down forever because of one bad word that you didn't even know what you said. It just came out. Just came out. And your iman will not be straight, will not be upright until your heart is upright, and your heart will not be upright until you control your tongue. These are heavy hadith. So we said we'd talk about hadith, we'll talk about the Quran, and we'll talk a little about some of the another hadith. For example, the Prophet ﷺ says, ألا أنبئكم بأمرين خفيفين لم يليق الله بمثلهما. He says, should I teach you two little things? Should I teach you about two little things? Should I tell you about two little things that, or two light things that Allah has given, which there's nothing like? He says, as-sumt wa husn al-khuluq, silence and good character. And then I said I'd talk a little bit about what some of the earlier scholars have said. Dhunun al-Masri, for example, he says, أحسن الناس لنفسه أملكهم للسانه. The best person, the person who is best towards other people, is the one who controls his tongue. Again, it goes back to how you are with your community, with your society, with your family. If you can control your tongue, you're going to be good to everybody. If you can't control your tongue, you're going to damage everything. And it's not good enough just to say, I was only joking. Which is the usual excuse, isn't it? It's just a joke. Can't take a joke? It's better you didn't say it. Luqman alayhi salam said, قال لقمان لابنه يا بني إذا افتخر الناس عليك بحسن كلامهم فافتخر أنت بحسن صمتك. He says, if people boast about how good they are at speaking, you, my son, you boast about how good you are to being silent. Oh, sorry, not boast. Boast is the wrong word. Take pride. If people take pride in how well they speak, you, my son, you should take pride in how good you are in silence. SubhanAllah. How good are we in silence? How good are we in silence? One of the scholars said, do you want me to teach you all the knowledge of the knowledgeable, or the ilm al-ulama, the wisdom of the wise ones, and all of the medicine of the doctors? Shall I? Shall I teach you the ilm al-ulama, hikmat al-hukama, wa tibb al-atibba? Do you want me to teach you that? Because break time now, isn't it? Or shall I teach you those three things before? He says, okay, I'll teach you the ilm al-ulama. He says, أما العلم العلماء فإذا سئلت أما لا تعلم فقل لا أعلم. The ilm of the ulama is that if you don't know, say Allahu A'lam. Now you've got all of the knowledge of the ulama. Okay? So if you know what it is, say it. And if you don't, you say Allahu A'lam. And this is really the ilm al-ulama. Do you know Yahya bin Yahya al-Laythi? He's like one of the most famous students of Imam Malik. He came from Andalusia. He came from Spain to Al-Madinah. He traveled all that distance. Can you imagine, we're talking of, this is 90 years, 100 years after the Prophet ﷺ. This was not an easy time to travel across North Africa. I mean, it's not an easy time any time to travel across North Africa. But he traveled all that distance. Before he left, he'd written down 39 questions, I think, or 36 questions for Imam Malik. He's traveling from Andalusia to go to the Imam of the world in Al-Madinah Al-Munawwara with 36 questions. And I know how he feels, because I remember the second time I went to Tarim. You're going to Tarim? Oh, you're going to see Al-Habib Umar? Or you're going to see the ulama? Ask him this. Oh, ask him this. Ask him this. And I had to go with a book full of questions. And I remember going there and just going, I said, Habib, is it possible, can I have a little bit of time? I have some questions from the brothers and sisters in Glasgow. And he says, yeah, marhaba. And he gave me like an hour. And we just went through one question, next question. So alhamdulillah, I got most of the questions. And then at the end of it, sorry for sidetracking, but Habib Umar, this is the adab of Habib Umar. He said, not one of those questions was from you, was it? So what do you want to ask me? Ashib. But anyway, so I know how he feels. So Imam al-Layth, he travels all the way across North Africa with 36 questions. And he gets to Imam Malik after all of these months and months of traveling through difficult. He asks him the first question. Imam Malik, Allahu A'lam. Allah knows best. Question number 2, Allahu A'lam. Question number 3, Allahu A'lam. Question number 4, he answers it. Question number 5, Allahu A'lam. Question number 6, Allahu A'lam. Allah knows best. He answers 4 questions. He's travelled all this way and he gets no answers except Allah knows best. Ajib. This is the knowledge of the ulama. Allahu A'lam. Allah knows best. If people really knew that, they would be so much more scholarly. But now, how often do you hear people say Allahu A'lam? Except when they say, this is the answer. He's wrong, and he's wrong, he's an idiot, he's an idiot, he's an idiot, he's going to the hellfire, he's kafir, and Allah knows best. That's usually, isn't it? That's usually when people say Allah, that's what they mean. Meaning, I know best and Allah knows that. It's very, very rare when somebody who actually means Allahu A'lam. And this is the knowledge of the ulama. Like one of the earlier generations, not earlier, I mean, he's actually just beyond us. Said Ahmad bin Zayn al-Dahlan. He died like 100 years ago. But I met people who met him, so I can't even consider him. I mean, admittedly, they were in their 90s. But so he used to come out, and he came out to his lesson. He came out. He says, "I'm not prepared. Go home. I'm not prepared. My lesson. Go home." This is in the Masjid al-Haram. He's known as the top alim of the world. And he came out, he says, "I haven't prepared my lesson, you should go home." And one of the scholars said, "But why do you have to prepare the lesson? You wrote the book." He was actually teaching his own book. And he said, "No, I didn't read it today. I didn't read it today." He wrote the book. He knows the book inside out. It's his book. But he said, "I didn't read it today." Meaning that he had, and the reason why Imam Malik had answered, because Imam Malik had answered all of those questions elsewhere. That's why people were surprised. Why did he say Allahu A'lam? And the reason was because he hadn't read it within the last 4 or 5 days. So if he hadn't got the answer direct from the hadith in the last few days, fresh in his mind, he'd rather not say anything. So this is the ilm al-ulama. When you don't know something, you say Allahu A'lam. Now if you've got that, khalas, you're all ulama, go away. Hikmatul hukama, فَإِذَا كُنْتَ جَلِيسُ قَوْمًا, when you're sitting with people, فَكُنْ أَسْكَتُهُمْ, be the most silent of them. When you're sitting with people, speak the least of all of them. فَإِنْ أَصَابُوا, and if what they say is correct and good, كُنْتَ مِنْ جُمْلَتِهِمْ, if what they say is good, you're one of them. You'll be rewarded for everything that they say that's good. Okay? وَإِنْ أَخْطُوا, and if they make mistakes, سَلِمْتَ مِنْ خَطِئِهِمْ, you're safe from their mistakes. You're not counted amongst them. So you want to be wise? Whenever you're with people, be the most silent of all of them. And then I look, Yeah. The clever people that I've known in my life, they don't talk much. But when they do talk, you know what they said. When they do talk, you know what they said. And all of the ulama that I know, the big ulama, like, for example, Shaykh Ibrahim al-Siyafa, he doesn't speak. Except when he's like, when the tap's turned on, khalas, then it just flows. And sometimes I actually concluded, maybe it's not him that's speaking. Because it's just I don't know. Maybe it's just something happens. Tap turns on, somebody else just takes over his body and just he speaks on the, I don't know, it looks like that to me. But outside of that, he doesn't speak. But when he does say something, it's powerful. And then, what was the last thing I said? You've got all of the knowledge of the ulama. You've got all the wisdom of the wise people. Right, what was the last thing I was going to say now that Dr. Saab has just come in? You want to know all of the tip of a tibba, the medicine of all of them. You don't need to go study for 8 years. I can give it you in one sentence. According to this, it says, simple. Don't eat unless you're hungry. He said, I've given you everything. Now go. You've learned everything you need to know. Don't eat unless you're hungry. Ajib. What time did you say the break was?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. I continue. Alhamdulillah. Okay, because I know Yasin's not here physically, but his presence, you can still feel it. So I don't want to upset him. May Allah give him good health. SubhanAllah. Here's another brother. You know, when he speaks, it means something. But I remember the first time I was late here. You know, I can remember his words exactly. Wow, it was so bang. What did he say? You're late. That's all he said. You're late. Ajib. You see how powerful words can be. It's still, because alhamdulillah, and every time I come here, I'm thinking, am I going to be on time? Am I going to be on time? Am I going to be on time? Because he just said to me, you're late. Because he doesn't say much, but when he does speak, khalas, it matters. And when he jokes, khalas, he's got such a good sense of humor, and he's just such a great person to be with, because he doesn't speak a great deal. So even when he's silent, he's good fun. He's good to be with. But when he speaks, it's even better. Alhamdulillah. What was I going to say? Okay, Sayyidina Zain al-Abidin. Once he came out to Sayyidina Zain al-Abidin came out to the before that one story, just to go back to that speech and the likes of Shaykh Ibrahim al-Siyafa, the likes of Yasin, and the real people who understand this. One of the scholars, Al-Asma'i, he said that somebody had said to him that if you say to me one word, I hear 10. But if you say to me 10 words, I only hear 1. Say that again. If you say to me one word, I hear 10. But if you say to me 10, I only hear 1. He only said 2 words to me. You're late. And I'm still scared. How many months later? 6 months later, and I'm still scared to be late. Because he said, you're late. Ajib. It's not the amount of words that you say. It's sometimes the amount of words you don't say. And sometimes it's, you know, the more you talk, khalas, it's more damaging. In particular when you talk to kids. You need to be careful that when you tell kids off, you use as few words as possible. You use as few words as possible. Because the more words you use, the longer the torment is, so to speak, and the less effective it is. Because all they get is this pain, so to speak, of being told off, but not actually hearing anything. It's like they're being tortured. Whereas if you say a few words, for example, that's not nice. If it's powerful, if you said it in the right context at the right time, that's not nice. It's more powerful than saying, you know, you shouldn't have done that because that's all they hear, and they don't actually. No, that's not nice. It's the same as you're late. Okay, right. I just finished with one last story where Sayyidina Zayn al-Abidin, he came out of the mosque, and somebody came to him and started fasabbahu. He started to curse him, and then some of the people around Sayyidina Zayn, of course, you know Sayyidina Zayn al-Abidin is the great grandson of, he's Ali ibn al-Hussein ibn Fatima Zahra ibn Rasulullah. So great grandson. So he's the great grandson of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So obviously he has a lot of people who love him, and so he's there and he's talking, and they start to get a bit agitated that this man could insult and curse him in such a way, and he just says, no, leave him, let him finish what he's saying. Mahlan, mahlan, he says.
Patience.
Yeah, take it easy, just let him finish, it's okay, don't worry about it. Mahlan. And then he finished, and he says, is there anything, and then when the person had finished everything, all of the insults he had, he says, is there anything else? Is there anything else that's upset you? And then he said, no. He said, you sure there's nothing you need? And he says, no. Because he'd let him insult him, and then at the end he says, is everything okay? Is there anything you need? And then at this point, he said everything. He's insulted him, he cursed him, and he says, no. And then he says, just wait a minute. And he went away and he took his black cloak, and he says, this is for you. And the man put it on, and he says, Wallahi, this is the son of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he left. So here, his sumt, the silence of the grandson of the Prophet, Sayyidina Ali Zayn al-Abidin, the silence was the most powerful tool in dealing with people. And sometimes silence is what's meant, فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرٌ أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ, you should say good, or you should stay silent, because sometimes silence is the most powerful tool in dealing with people. And another example, almost exactly the same thing happened with Al-Habib Umar, who we just mentioned, when he went to Sana'a one year. And there was a man stood up, and he just was really abusive. And Habib Umar just told him, everyone just let him finish. And he just went on and on and on. At the end of it, he just says, is there anything else? And then he told him, you're welcome to stay if you wish, or if you wish, I will be happy to come and visit you and talk to you again. And he says, no, it's okay, I'll stay. And he just sat, and he'd finished his rant, and then the Habib just carried on with the dars. The next day the man came to the dars again, and he didn't rant. He didn't go on with the Habib Umar, and he just became one of his students. Because he needed to. So sometimes what's meant by that is, silence is فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرٌ أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. So you should speak good, or you should stay silent. So this leads us to one big question. I said I had a list of things I was going to cover, which was, we were going to talk about classes of speech, Quran and the speech, Hadith of speech, some stories and narrations. There's one story I really should have told you, but I couldn't. It's all about somebody dying under a tree, but we'll leave that another time. And then one of the things was, we have these afat al-lisan. And what did you say they were? Somebody said it. Calamities of the tongue. Okay, we'll stick to that for now. Afat al-lisan, we couldn't get a translation for it. I said tests of the tongue, but calamities was a better one apparently. No? Yeah, you? Yeah. Because you weren't here, so I was thinking maybe you've got something to add to it. See, this is one of the... You see what I mean? See what I told you about the ulama? Allahu a'lam. Allahu a'lam. frustrates you, doesn't it? Anyway, right, I want you to list, before we take a break, 5 afat al-lisan, 5 calamities of the tongue, or tests of the tongue, or bad actions of the tongue. I'll give you maybe the first one. Lying. Okay? So 5. You can do it in pairs, triples, I don't care. So give them a few minutes and then we'll count that as a break time. So okay, so break is at 15. We did start 10 minutes late, so he won't be angry with me. You got 5?
No.
You've done 5? Khalas, you can go for break first. I don't know if somebody's got 5 quickly, that means that they know them so well because they because it's part of their life, or they know them so well because they've avoided them. May Allah reward you, alhamdulillah. So you can take your break first. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. I can understand why the break is a little bit longer, because these chocolate, dates, hazelnut in one item, subhanallah. So those people that are still eating, you're free to eat. This is exempt from any kind of rebuke. Kulu washrabu haniyan bima aslaftum min ayyam al-khaliya. Eat and enjoy, because of the days that we didn't have such things. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so afat al-lisan. Right, shall we just go around one at a time? What have we got? Lying, slander. Okay. Backbiting. What's backbiting? Can somebody define what backbiting is? When you say something behind somebody's back. Sorry? When you say something behind somebody's back that if they were there, they wouldn't be happy with it, they wouldn't like it. So if I spoke about Yasin, I said that he's very quiet. If he was unhappy, if he would have been unhappy if I'd said that when he's here, then that would be backbiting. Even if it wasn't particularly a bad thing, but if it was something that would upset him when he was present, it's such a bad thing that it would upset him, or you said something bad about somebody that he wouldn't like it when he was present, even if it's true, because there's a difference between backbiting and slander. Al-Buhtan is slander, is where it's not even true. So if, for example, an example of this was one of the worst, there's a case of backbiting where the Prophet ﷺ had come from one of his wives to another of his wives. He'd come from one of his wives to one of his other wives. And she asked, so, where have you come from? And he said, from Safiya. And she said to him, Takfik, she's sufficient for you. She's enough for you. Now that doesn't mean much, does it? It's not a really horrible thing to say, is it? She's enough for you. What she meant was that she's small. Because Sayyidatuna Safiya was small. So she says, yeah, she's enough for you. Meaning she's not such a big woman. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, what you have just said, if all of the oceans were to try and wash it away, it wouldn't wash away the word that you've said. All of the oceans of the earth wouldn't wash away what you've just said. That's how bad it is. And you think about that, by our standards, that's not backbiting. That's not even an insult. She's enough for you. Meaning, implying that she's... And then even backbiting isn't just lisan afat lisan. Afat lisan, but it can also be hatta bil ishara. Just it can be backbiting. Just by making a face. Him. Khalas, that's backbiting. Anything that you've done to imply that if that person in their absence, if they were there, that they would be upset by that what you've said, then it's backbiting. Then I'll add one to that, is slander, which is one step above that, which is actually where it's not even true. Where you've said, like if you said something which is true, so and so, he's such and such. No, he drinks. That's backbiting. In this case, it's not backbiting because I haven't actually said anybody, and I'm not. But if you were to say so and so drinks, and it's true he does drink, but he'd be upset by the fact that you said it, that's backbiting. So that's what backbiting is. So we've had lying. Sorry, what was the one you gave? Slander. Backbiting.
Making too much use.
Joking too much. Excessive joking, yeah. Because the Prophet ﷺ did joke and tease. And there's nothing wrong with joking and teasing. And there were companions who joked and teased. There was one companion who used to play practical jokes on other companions, and the Prophet ﷺ used to laugh because they didn't hurt anybody. But the difference was that he never lied. The Prophet ﷺ never lied when he joked. He would joke, but he would only tell the truth. So joking is not itself haram, and in fact it's from the sunnah to joke. But you have to do it within the context, and there has to be a purpose. Like we said, that there's speech which has good and has harm and good. The joke has to have good as well as harm. No, it has to have good and hopefully not too much harm. But it has a little bit of harm because it's empty. But also, a lot of the getting to know somebody is part of da'wah. Getting to know a person is part of da'wah. And there was one brother who was he travelled with me, and he said that he learnt more about music travelling through East Africa with me than he'd learnt in all of his life. How did he do this? Was because there was one guy who used to come to the mosque. This was in Zanzibar, and he used to have dreadlocks, and it was quite clear he was a pseudo Rasta. So he came to the mosque just to he was kind of completely stoned. You use that word here, stoned. You know what I mean? Yeah, high. He was completely stoned. He came in the mosque, and not Muslim. And then afterwards, I just went out. We sat on the baraza, the veranda, and we just talked about Bob Marley, like for an hour. And then the next day he came back to the mosque because he wanted to talk about Bob Marley. And then the next day he came, and just like for 3 or 4 nights, all he did was just come and just talk about music. And then after a few nights, guess what? He became Muslim. We didn't talk about Islam, we just talked about music for days. Alhamdulillah. So I'm hoping that me talking about Bob Marley will not be counted as harmful, because the good that was possibly in there was maybe, and in there I'm sure we joked a lot as well. And it was interesting that because some of Bob Marley's songs were based on the Bible, and a lot of what the justification, for example, for cannabis comes from the Bible, or they justify it from Revelations 10, if you're interested. And also some stories of Noah, and they said when Noah landed, the first thing he got to was a marijuana tree. So marijuana is it's biblical, man. And they've got this in their mind that marijuana is the sacred plant. So he didn't drink, he just smoked. He didn't need to drink because he was completely stoned all the time. So we talked about the Bible, we talked about Noah, we talked about a lot of things, and it all came from talking about Bob Marley. because one of his albums was called Revelations, which is based on this verse of this biblical ayah. So joking, talking can have benefits if it's got a purpose, and even talking about somebody, about getting to know somebody, is important. So joking excessively, and certainly going into to music, for example. I'll give you an example as excess. There's a brother who we used to talk a lot about music, and then one day we talked about guitars, and he asked me, like, so what's your favourite guitar? And I says, well, actually it's a Strad. I said, I've got a Strad. And he's like really, really excited. So what did happen? The next dars I had, what happened? He brought his Strad along. So he's got, I'm giving my dars, and we do a dhikr and a dars, and in the corner I could see he's got his guitar and the amp. I'm just thinking, he's not serious, is he? We finished the dars, we had our meal, and then he gets the guitar out, and then he hands it to me and says, do you want a shot? And I was thinking, this has gone one step too far. This is excess. Because when I was talking to him, I wasn't talking about guitars. I was talking about him as a person. I wanted to know about him as a person. I wanted to connect with him as a human being. I didn't want him to come and give me a guitar so we can play, Led Zeppelin tunes, which is what he was hoping we were going to do. And also what had happened sometimes in the gatherings, after they'd done the Mawlid, the brothers would go home and some people would stay behind and play guitar and just have a jam session. What they do afterwards is not my problem, but this would be excess. So you need to know the limits even of the getting to know somebody, that you get to know somebody to get to know them as a human being, not because you're interested in Bob Marley or you want to talk about Bob Marley. There's a purpose to that. Okay, so excess, that's the key word. Peter, what have we got on? Anything that we haven't said yet? Ladies. Allah, oh, mashallah. Sorry? Boasting. Boasting is where the fakhr is where you take pride in a particular action. There's a difference between, for example, talking about being blessed, because the Quran says, فَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ. As for the blessings of your Lord, speak about them. So to speak about the blessings, the Prophet ﷺ says, Hadith an ni'mah dhikr, that talking about the blessings is itself showing gratitude for the blessing. But there's a balance, because when you're talking about me, then it's boasting. But if you're honest about saying, oh, subhanAllah, Allah blessed me with this, Allah blessed me with that, and it's real that you are remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then this isn't boasting. And that's permitted. And it's actually recommended. But it has to be within a particular context. So here it goes back to the hadith, the very first hadith we studied, which was, sorry? The very first hadith that we studied here, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالَ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Actions are by your intentions. So the speech should have an intention. And that's so fakhr, because the Prophet ﷺ says, أَنَا سَيِّدْ وَلَدَ آدَمَ وَلَا فَخْرٍ. I am the best of all humankind. That's not a boast. Because it wasn't a boast. He's actually telling us a blessing that he's been given, which is beneficial to us, because now we know what his status is. So Yawm al-Qiyamah, we know who to go to. Why waste your time coming to somebody else? Because he said he's the Sayyid of Walid Adam. Excellent. So fakhr. Anything else, ladies? Swearing. Yeah, swearing is al-fahsha. Fahsha is just basically being foul-mouthed and saying things which are just not appropriate to yeah, that's something which is completely forbidden. And after the salah, there's this verse after the khutbah. Which is the verse that people usually end the khutbah with? Inna Allah ya'murukum bil 'adl wal ihsan wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha wal munkar وَيَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَةِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ. And he forbids you from doing fahsha, speaking badly, bad language, وَالْمُنْكَرِ, and doing bad. You know who introduced this bid'ah? Because the Prophet ﷺ didn't end his khutbah with this. It was Umar. Umar bin Abdul Aziz. It was Umar bin Abdul Aziz. When did Umar ibn Abdul Aziz do this? Because Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, of course, was an Umayyad. He was one of the Umayyad Khulafa. Although we recognize him as the Khalifatul Adil, the honest Khalifa, he was actually Umayyad by dynasty. His rule was Umayyad. He was Umayyad in family, but we never think of him as an Umayyad. Why? Because he was different. And one of the things that was so different was that in every khutbah, since the Umayyads came to power, they used to curse others. That was one of their traits. And he forbade them from cursing anybody. He said, "Inna Allah ya'muru bil adli wa ihsan wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahshi wal munkar." He says that, and he forbids you, Allah is quoting you, and he forbids you from using bad language and doing bad actions. And al-fahsha is bad by the tongue, and munkar is bad by the hand. Excellent. Any others? Anyway, there's many books called Afat al-Lisan, or for example, in Imam al-Ghazali's Ihya, there's a section on Afat al-Lisan. There's in Nasah al-Diniyah, the Imam al-Haddad, there's a big section on Afat al-Lisan, the tribulations of the tongue. Okay, so this is the first part of the hadith. You can see why I'm sorry about this, as why I said, you know, maybe we're not going to get all three hadith. وَمَنْ كَانَ يُؤْمِنْ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَلْيَكْرِمْ جَارَهُ. He should be kind to his neighbor. Whoever believes in the last day, Allah and his last day, should be kind to his neighbor. Yakrim, actually kind isn't the right word, is it? فَلْيَكْرِمْ جَارَهُ. He should honor his neighbor. Yeah. Would you honor? What's your translation say? Honor, yeah, honor his neighbor. He should show dignity. He should raise the person. Should show honor to them. This is connected to the Quran. Actually, commands you to this. Allah Subhanahu wa Taala says, "Wa'budu Allah, wa la tushrik bihi shay'an." Worship Allah and do not attribute partners to Him. Wa bil walidayni ihsana, and to your parents show ihsan, show excellence. Now there's a difference between excellence and not harming, because a lot of the things talk about don't do this, don't do that, but here he actually commands you to show excellence to your parents, وَبِذِي الْقُرْبَى, and those who are close to you, family, وَالْمَسَاكِينَ, and the poor, وَالْجَارِ, and the neighbor, ذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْجَارِ الْجُنُوبِ, the one who is close to you, and I translate it literally, the one who is close to you and the one who is far. Right, close neighbor, far neighbor. What does it mean? Close neighbor, far neighbor. The problem with these dates, with chocolate and hazelnut in them, is it mashes your brains up. I'll ask you questions, you're still asleep. Huh? What does it mean? Close neighbor, far neighbor.
I think maybe you are referring to the concept of neighborhoods, like 40 neighbors this way.
Perhaps. That's perhaps what it means, and that's one of the interpretations. Yes?
Maybe the one you're closest with in terms of friendship, the one you're furthest away from.
Okay, closeness in terms of relationship, or Jared al-Kurba. So if I'm in Hoytostrup, they're all my neighbors. But Baji Salma is a closer neighbor than the one next door to us. Why?
It's the family.
Yeah. It's my she's not just she's not just a neighbor, she's family and neighbor. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ says, Al-Jiran Thalatha. There are three types of neighbor. Al-Jiran Thalatha. Jar al-Haq Wahid. There is a neighbor who has one right. وهو أدنى الجيران حقا. And he's the lowest of your neighbors. Actually, lowest isn't the right. Lowest I'm translating here. Adna meaning lowest, but actually Adna means closest, doesn't it? In this, but it doesn't mean lowest is what I would say. Why? Because he just got one right. Okay, he just got one duty I owe him. هو أدنى حقا وجار له حقان. And there is a neighbor who has two rights. وجار له ثلاثة. And there is a neighbor who has three rights. وهو أفضل جيران. And he is the most preferred of all of your neighbors. فأما الذي له حق واحد. As for the one who only has one, فهو جار مشرك. He's a neighbor who is a polytheist. He's a polytheist. So he's your neighbor, but he believes in other gods. لا رحم له. And you have no family connection to him. So he's just some guy who happens to live next to you. You've got no religious connection to him. You've got no family connection to him. You don't share culturally with him. You don't share religiously with him. You don't share any family ties. But he's still got a right over you. وهو له حق واحد. والجار الذي له حقان فجار مسلم له حق والإسلام. And then there's a neighbor who is Muslim. So he has the right of being a neighbor and the right of being your Muslim brother. وأما الذي له ثلاثة حقوق فالجار المسلم ذو الرحم. And then the third is a neighbor who happens to be family. فله حق الإسلام وحق الجوار وحق الرحم. Because he has the right of family, the right of Islam, and the right of being a neighbor. So this is what's meant by the verse. واليتامى والمساكين وجار ذي القرب وجار الجنب وصاحب بالجنب وابن السبيل وما ملكت أيمانكم إن الله لا يحب من كان مختالا فخورا, which is Surah An-Nisa. So it appears in the Quran. It also appears in the Hadith many times about the neighbors. For example, the Prophet ﷺ said, ما زال جبريل يوصيني بالجار حتى ظننت أنه سيورثه. He says that Jibril used to come to me and he always used to talk about your neighbors. Your neighbor this, your neighbor that, your neighbor this, your neighbor this, your neighbor... Until I thought that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was going to tell me they have a right of inheritance. They will have right of inheritance. That's what it sounded like. That's the way it was going. Ajib. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he warned us about your neighbors. He says, "Man adha jarahu faqad adhani." Whoever harms his neighbor, he has harmed me. This is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam speaking. Whoever harms his neighbor has harmed me. It's like the Prophet ﷺ has protected the rights of the neighbor. And so if you go against your neighbor, you're going against the Prophet ﷺ. It's as if he's put him under his dhimma. What's dhimma in English? Protection, yeah? So in this sense, so it's, protection. It's as if he put the neighbors under your protection. Even, subhanAllah. And then he continues, وَمَنْ أَذَانِ. So whoever harms me or whoever shows animosity, فَقَدْ أَذَى Allah. And this is difficult to translate, but you can just listen to the words. Whoever harms me has harmed Allah. Of course, it's not harming. It means as if he's gone against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is because you went against your neighbor. And the Prophet sallallahu swore an oath. He says, وَاللَّهِ لَا يُؤْمِنُ مَنْ لَمْ يَأْمَنْ جَارُهُ بواقه. He says that I swear by God that he is not a believer whose neighbor is not safe from his harm. The Prophet ﷺ swore an oath that you're not a believer. He swore that you're not a believer if you harm your neighbors. He said خير الأصحاب خيرهم لصاحبه. The best of companions is the one who is best to his companions. وخير الجيران خيرهم لجاره. And the best of neighbors is the best to his neighbor. So the neighbors are really important. Right, I've got another, because you're still asleep. I'm going to give you another task. I want you to see if you can write down 3 duties you have towards your neighbors. 3 duties or 3 rights the neighbor has over you. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes to come up with 3 things. You got 3? You haven't got 3? How many have you got?
I'm just thinking.
You're still thinking you haven't got any? Okay, I'll help you. You don't let your kids break
That's some kind of third hand. I don't know.
Sorry? Okay. You don't let your kids break your neighbours' windows by playing cricket. Okay? Because I know you Pakistanis, you just love cricket too much. Alright?
You don't play too loud music
You don't play music too loud. Okay, that's 2.
late at night.
You don't play music too late at night. That's 3. Okay, that's fine. The rights of the Muslim, rights of the neighbour. No loud music. They don't break your windows. And you don't play. No, music not too loud and music not too late. Okay. Okay. Right. Start with the ladies. Rights of the neighbours. Start at the back, shall we? Back table. You don't go to bed if your neighbour's hungry. That's a serious one. Okay, next one. Next table. See, you see how the difference between the guys and the ladies? The ladies come up with these deep philosophical ones. Don't go to bed and if your neighbour's hungry. What does he come up with? Don't play music too loud. Khalas. Anything else, ladies? Yes, please.
Also, if they can smell your food,
Yep.
then they have a right. With that as well.
If-
Those example ones, I heard.
If they can smell your food, you must give them
Or,
some.
I mean,
So you make sure you don't. They can't smell.
then
Actually, barbecue is really important because that encompasses a lot of the rights of the neighbour. And one of the rights of the neighbour is if you're having a barbecue in your garden, you should invite them. If they can see your garden, then you shouldn't eat in front of them without inviting them. And certainly if they can smell your food, you should invite them. And please?
share their happiness and their sorrow.
Excellent. Whenever they're happy, you should share in it. Whenever they're sad, you should share in it. Allahu A'lam. Please, but they'll make up for it by the ladies will give us one more. Please. You shouldn't give your kids nice clothes if your neighbours are poor. Yep.
I think I see that it's very simple rights.
Sorry?
That we can very simple right that I see that can be useful is to greet the neighbor when you meet him, because here it's very different culture.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't greet. So I think it can change very much if we use greetings with neighbors. I think it can change all the ideas that we have towards, for example, talking about non-Muslims that are our neighbors.
Yeah.
It's very simple, right? It can change.
That's a very important one, and it's a very practical one, is that to greet people, because we take it for granted because we're Muslims, we all greet each other all the time. It's just like, we spend most of our time hugging, and that's how we are. We just like kind of, but it's not like that in this community. And I don't know if it was you, but there was one person here in Denmark who said they'd moved into a neighborhood and where everybody was kind of really against them, and they just kept greeting their neighbors. They didn't put it off. They didn't, even though the neighbors didn't respond. They kind of, hi. And after a while, it took a bit of time, but like after 3 or 4 weeks, the neighbors started greeting them. But it was kind of a big change. They started it, and it was after a few weeks, and that was actually a Danish person. I'm not. It was you who told me this. No, it was one of the brothers that said. Actually, I moved into a neighborhood, and they seemed to really be kind of anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, or whatever it was. But slowly, I just spoke to them, just greeted them, and then they started eventually greeting me, and it kind of made such a big difference to how the community functioned. And that's a simple thing, greeting them.
It's changed a lot. And I always remember the Prophet Afsha Salam. It can change many things.
Yeah. And part of that, Ifsha Salam, it actually means spread the salam. That is a very beautiful, in Arabic it's just so beautiful, it's spread peace. Of course it means greet people, but actually the wording means spread peace. But it means greet people, spread peace, greet people. It's such a beautiful thing. And another hadith is It'am at-ta'am wa afshi salam. Give people food and spread peace, which is what the sisters have been talking about. If you're having a barbecue, invite your neighbours. So alhamdulillah, they're so deep, the sisters are. The essence of Islam, food. It's true. Alhamdulillah.
Was it your neighbor when sick?
Visit your neighbour when you're sick. In particular your neighbours. That's one of the rights.
Guarding his property when he's absent.
Guarding his property when he's absent. Looking at that's another one. And we've already got yours. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ says, Haqqul jar in marada udtu. When the right of a neighbour is that if he's sick, you visit him. In mata shayya'tuhu. And when he dies, you follow his grave, follow his beer, his body. You attend his funeral. When istaqarta aqradtahu, and if he requires a loan, you give him a loan. If your neighbour needs money, a loan, you give him a loan. It's interesting. He mentioned specifically giving a loan. A few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, there was we marked the Laylatul Isra wal Mi'raj, the night of the Isra wal Mi'raj. And on the Isra wal Mi'raj, if you look at the hadith that appears in Bukhari, there's a point in it where it says the reward of the person, reward of sadaqah is such and such, and the reward of giving a loan is 10 times as much. I can't remember the exact numbers because I'm not good in maths, but the principle was the same, was that if you give a loan, it's 10 times as good as if you give charity. And somebody asked, why is giving a loan so important? Why get such a high reward? And it's 2 parts. One, you never ask for a loan unless you need it. You never ask for a loan unless you need it. And you ask for the amount that you want. I want a loan for 56 krone. Or, why? I want to borrow chocolate, or I want to buy this. I don't want 70. I don't want 50. I want 56. I'll say 56 because that's what I want. And when I've done it with it, I'll give you 56 back. So it's very clear that my need is specific. Whereas, spare any change? It's very vague. And that's what beggars do. Beggars ask vague things because they just want something vague. But somebody who wants something, they ask specifically, I want this. And that's why therefore when you give them, and if you give me the amount that I ask for, I want you to give me 22,000 krone, please. because I need it. I'm not going to ask for that unless that's exactly what I need. So you're meeting somebody's need. The other thing is that what you're doing in a community is if you lend money to people, you're not making them dependent. Because there's an example of a brother I remember very well. It was very, very frustrating. Because when he became Muslim, he lived for about a year without doing any work. Without doing any work at all. After he became Muslim, he was just invited to people's houses. He never needed to. The only thing he needed was money for cigarettes. You know, that's all he needed, and he just used to ask people. And of course, people would invite him into their house and look after him and give him money. I was just thinking, I don't know what I've created here. I've created a monster in my community by, you know, introducing to all my friends, because he's never gonna grow up. And then he comes around and he says, looking to get married. I can't recommend him to get married. I mean, what kind of wife am I going to find for him? He's just not. It would have been better just slap him around the head and say, get a job, mate. That's what he needed. Or if I went to people, I said, don't give him money. Would have been better. Give him a loan. Make him pay it back. And if he can't pay it back, make him clean your garden. Because he was good with his hands, and he was good with gardens. So that's what he should do. Give him money, but if he can't pay it back, you ask him to do your garden for you, or get him to do your garden. Get him to do your neighbour's gardens. Get him to do everybody's garden, and then pay him, because that would be better, because it helps him. And then other people, he was telling other people about what a great religion Islam is. I was thinking, I don't really know if I want any more Muslims in my community. Just go away. Because it wasn't really encouraging. You know, all of these like dope smoking hippies would come into my house and say, I want to become Muslim too. And I was thinking, you know, by the way, marijuana is haram. Is it? Oh, it's tough. You know, but it's like, why am I attracting all of these people? And it's because we weren't giving them independence. And so giving loans is better than giving sadaqah. That's why the reward is so high. So if you give your neighbor money, it doesn't really help them. And also, does it really help your relationship? If your neighbor is poor and you're rich and you give them money, it's like, is it really making the connection between you better? It would be better to say, well, look, here's somebody, you couldn't do me a favour, please do such and such, so that they feel that they're contributing to what's going on. So that's why giving them a loan is important. And if they get into some kind of difficulty, there's some fault that they have, hide it. Don't let people know about their faults. When asabu khayran hanaytahu. And if they, as the sister said, if they do something good, you congratulate them about it. You share in their happiness. When asabu musibatan azaytahu. And if there's death in the family, you go there and you do ta'ziyah. Ta'ziyah is to say, A'adhamukallah ajran, may Allah reward you for your patience, may Allah take the deceased to the highest heavens, and do all of the things that are required about to do with condolences. Give them condolences. وَلَا تَرَفَ بَنَاءَكَ فَوْكَ بَنَائِهِ فَتَسَدَّ عَلَيْهِ الرِّيحِ. So don't build your house so that the wind don't build an extension so that the air can't circulate, so cause them difficulty. So you make sure that your planning of your house and your garden doesn't interfere with their comfort, like, I mean, the airflow or the water flow or their parking or whatever. وَلَا تُؤَذُّوا بِرِيحِ قَدْرَكَ إِلَّا أَن تَغْرِفُ لَهُ مِنْهَا. And don't have a barbecue unless you invite them. I mean, that's not exactly what it says, but the smell of your food shouldn't go to their house unless they participate in it. So be careful. Don't put sealants around so nobody can smell your food. But if they do know what you're cooking, then involve them. And then in another narration, he says, "When ishtarayta fakiya فَهْدِي لَهُ مِنْهَا. And if you buy, in another narration of the hadith, it says, and if you buy apples, give them some. And if فإن لم تفعل فأدخلها سرا ولا يخرج بها ولدك فيغيظ بها ولده. And then the second thing is, even if you buy something and giving them would cause some kind of income, because you, oh, by the way, here's some apples I've just bought. It might not be the right way to do it. So even there, you somehow give them some gifts without them. Don't make it so obvious so that they know that you're giving them charity. And also you put a burden on them that they think that they need to give you food. Because that's another problem, is that, for example, in Ramadan, if you sent food to your neighbours, then obviously they're going to think to send food to you. But if you send them like, a whole bowl of pilau, then they're going to be obliged or feel obliged that they've got to now cook pilau for you or do some big thing, and they don't, in Ramadan they just have sandwiches. So don't do that. And then the last thing is, make sure your children don't go out and harm their children. Okay. So the question of Dhul Qurba, you said it was the neighborhood. And how big did you say the neighborhood was?
40.
According to one hadith, the Prophet ﷺ described neighbours, and he said 40 houses this way, 40 houses this way, 40 houses this way, and 40 houses this way. So that's your neighbourhood, the whole of the distance of 40 houses. They're all considered to be your neighbours. So the Sayyidatuna Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, I have neighbours around me, but I only have one gift. Who should I give it to? And the Prophet ﷺ answered, the one who's closest. So the closest neighbour is closer than the furthest neighbour. So it's 40 houses, but there are some who are more close to you. Abdul ibn Amr, he used to give food to his all of his neighbours, and somebody asked him, you give food to your Jewish neighbours? And then he quoted the hadith that we quoted earlier about the rights of the neighbour. And he says, it's nothing to do with Muslims or non-Muslims, they're your neighbours, you should give food. And that reminds me of the last dars that we had here, where Shaykh Afifuddin was talking about his neighbours were Christian, and he used to go there on Christmas Day to greet them, to share in their happiness. And they used to put the dog away, and they used to hide the wine when they knew the Shaykh was coming. But he did that every year. Okay, so that's neighbours. Then the last part of the hadith, it says, وَمَنْ كَانَ يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ فَلْيَكْرِمْ ضَيْفَهُ. And he should show honour to his neighbour. No, to his guest. So here it's talking about the rights of the guest. So how do you define a guest? What's the right of a guest? A dayf in Arabic. What حق الضيافة? Somebody just turns up on your house, on your doorstep, to visit you. What do you have to give them? What do you have to do to honour them? If I just turn up on your doorstep and say, I want to stay here tonight, do I have a right to do that? You think so? So I can? Okay, good. What if I want to stay tomorrow night as well?
In 3 days.
You think 3 days? Okay. 3 nights. Okay, very precise. Okay. Yeah, that's... There's a different hadith. There's difference of opinion on this, because the Prophet ﷺ said, according to a hadith related by Ibn Majah, Laylatul Dayf haqqun ala kulli Muslim. The night, one night, is the right of every Muslim. So there's a hadith which is clear that you have a right to stay one night. But there's other hadith which says 3 nights. الضيافة 3 أيام فَمَا زَادَ فَهُوَ صَدَقَةٌ. The Prophet ﷺ said that the diafa, guest, how do you say diafa in English? Guest. Hospitality. Hospitality is for 3 days. And what is beyond 3 days is sadaqah. So if I come to your house and I stay for a month, then the first 3 days is my right. And the rest of the month is your charity. Okay? And then there's adab within that. Because, and also whether it's actually the right of a guest. What exactly is the right of a guest? And Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal says it is his right. And if a person goes to somebody's house and they refuse to show hospitality, he can go to the qadi, and the qadi can go and force the person to host him. That's what Ahmad ibn Hanbal. And if he still refuses, the qadi can then take food from the man's house and give it to the guest. I think Ahmad ibn Hanbal was quite strict on this issue. But that's just to mention that that's the reality of this. But what is the right? Is to treat them well. And there's a difference between haqq al-jar or haqq al-diyafa and ihsan ila al-dayf. When this talks about the right is the minimum. Al-ihsan is what the verse talked about. That you should show excellence to your walidain, to your parents, to the neighbours. Excellence is that which is beyond the just giving rights, and that's what the companions were like. They excelled in everything, and that's what we aspire to, and that's why the aspiration should be based on the verse وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ, that they would prefer to give to those others rather than themselves. And this verse relates to diafa, to hospitality. And I think I told this story before, that this verse, somebody came to Al-Madinah from outside of the city. They came to visit the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ went home and asked, what food do we have? And he had several houses where his wives would be. Went to the first, now we have nothing. And we haven't had food for 2 days. Went to the next, we haven't had food for 3 days. We haven't had food, we don't have any food. And there was no food in any of his houses. No food, no water. So he had nothing to give any hospitality to. So he went back and he asked, who would look after the guests of the Prophet ﷺ? And Abu Bakr's head went down. And Abu Bakr was always the first. He was the first in everything. In the community, Abu Bakr always outstripped everybody. Umar ibn Khattab said, there's no good thing that I did except Abu Bakr beat me to it. This is just, and Abu Bakr's head went down because he had no food. And Umar ibn Khattab's head was down, he had no food. This was the community of the Prophet ﷺ. They had nothing. And then one of the companions says, I will look after the guests of Rasulullah, but give me a minute, I'll go home first. So he went home and he asked, what food do we have? And she says, we have no food. We just have food for the child. We only have food for our child. He says, okay, put the child to bed. And then when I bring the guest, as soon as I come in, blow the candle out. And when I blow the candle out, then we pretend to eat and give the food to the guest. So the Prophet came back, I will look after the guests of the Prophet ﷺ. So they came in, the candle, and they're sitting, pretending to eat, and he's eating. And then he spends the night, he's eaten, he's happy, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down this verse, وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. He says they prefer others over themselves, even though it causes them difficulties. So this is what ihsan is that this is how you will excel. But the haqq al-dayf is that you give them that which you would have for yourself without causing you any difficulty. Whatever you have, that's what they eat. So if I come to your house and I insist, actually you're Lebanese, I want shawarma. Okay, this is what I want. Huh? I don't have that right. If you're having shawarma, then I'll join you. But I will eat what you eat. I will eat what you eat. And that's the right And the best example, again, when I read hadith, stories come into my head. And like I say, like this queue at Netto, maybe I'm just a bit crazy. Or this Shaykh Ibrahim Osiefa, or that sister in the car park. And when I think of this, I think of my beloved teacher, Shaykh Mahmoud Galal. When he wasn't single, he didn't have his family with him. He's my teacher, but we used to always, I study in the school or the mosque. So when I visited him as my teacher to show him respect. And I remember one day I went to his house and he had a tomato. That's what he had in his fridge. He had a tomato. And I came into his house and he opened his fridge and there was a tomato. And he just got a plate and he just cut this tomato. And it was like, subhanallah, it's like, it was just so, it just explained to me what this hadith was about. And he didn't feel guilty, he didn't feel good, he didn't feel bad. It was just, this is what haqq is. Yeah, we have a tomato, let's share the tomato. And it was just so beautiful that he explained to me what haqq al-diyafa is. If you have a guest, you treat them well. And it's not the quantity of what you give, it's that you give from your heart. And that you give them, the right is that you give them what you would normally give. And some of the ulama have said about this 3 days, the first day you should give them, the best thing is to make a point about them. That if you're coming to my house, then I should tell my family, oh, Hassan is coming today. They should know Hassan is coming today. This is the correct way to behave. Hassan is coming today. What does that mean? It means I'm probably going to get better food that day than the rest of the week. Why? Because Hassan is coming. Yeah? So, and the spice will be slightly less. Okay? There'll be maybe a little bit more meat, maybe even shawarma, I don't know. But it's going to, and we're going to make sure that there's going to be some nice tea. It's going to be, it's going to be planned. It's going to be planned food. So the first night, they should know that Hassan is coming. The second night, no difference. Doesn't matter who Hassan is. The second night he shouldn't have anything special. The first night he should. We should make something special for him because he's arrived. The second night he should have exactly what I would have had. Why? Because you're not special. You're not special. You're Hassan. You're not so special. You're my pal. You're my brother. You're not this. We're not talking about Shaykh so and so. Such and so. You're not such a big alim, you're not such a great person. You're my friend. We're like this, and that's important because he needs to know he's like that with me. And if I'm going to make a big fuss of him for 3 whole days, it's kind of insulting in some ways. The first day, yes, and then the third day is exactly the same. And when he leaves, I should give him something. So the first day he should be made special. Second day he should be exactly the same as what we would eat. The third day, exactly the same, but he should be given a present. And then if he stays longer than that, khalas, he can stay longer. And you can stay as long as you like, Hassan. Okay, so that's the second hadith. Okay, first hadith. Oh, that was the first hadith. Afu minkum. Second hadith. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. الحديث السادس عشر عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رجلا قال للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أوصيني قال لا تغضب فردد مرارا قال لا تغضب رواه البخاري. Abu Hurairah رضي الله عنه reported that a man said to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, advise me. The Prophet said, do not become angry and furious. Actually, that's not quite right, is it? It just says لا تغضب, don't become angry. The man asked the same again and again. And each time the Prophet said, do not become angry. Right. What image do you get in your mind of what's happening here? I mean, just describe the picture to me.
The man probably doesn't understand what.
So you think he didn't understand? That's why he kept the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had to keep telling him.
There might be more to the message.
Okay, so he's thinking, yeah, there must be more. That's what you're thinking, yeah? Is that the kind of image you've got? Because there are many times where the Prophet ﷺ kind of, he does, you often hear this kind of approach in the hadith, and sometimes you don't pick up on exactly what's going on. For example, there's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, somebody came to him and says, "O Sini, give me some advice." And he said, the Prophet ﷺ says, "Ask for afiyah. If you ask for anything, ask for afiyah." Afiyah is a word which encompasses all goodness. So he says, and then he left. The next day he came back and he asked the same question. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "If you ask for anything, ask for afiyah." And then a few days later he came back and he asked the same question, and he said, if you ask something, then ask for afiyah. Now, why did the Prophet ﷺ give the same advice over several days to one person, which is different to this advice?
It depends on the person.
It depends on the person. But also, if you come to me and you ask, "Oh, give me a dua," and I say, give me a big dhikr. Give me a big dhikr. I want a big wazifa. I want to be a big shaykh. Okay? It happens, don't you? You get these big shaykhs coming from overseas and you think, "Oh, he's the biggest shaykh of the world. I'm going to get something from him." And you go and you say, Shaykh Sahab, can you give me a big wazifa?" He says, "Yeah." Say, "La ilaha illallah." You can't turn around and say, "That's not a wazifa. I want a big wazifa." So you leave it a few days. You come back and say, "Shaykh Sahab, can you give me a wazifa?" And he says, "Say la ilaha illallah." And then you come back a third time and you ask him the same time. He said, and you ask him, and he says, "Say la ilaha illallah." Then you're going to turn around and go to another shaykh and say, "Look, that shaykh's a phony. All he does is tell me to say la ilaha illallah. I want something big. Give me something like Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum Ya Malik. Just give me some big names of Allah." You know? What he's telling you is, this is it. Somebody asked me, like Shaykh Afifuddin was here last week, and somebody asked me, "So has he given you some big dhikr once?" He says, "Somebody give me a big dhikr. You've been with the Shaykh for so many years. What did he give you? What's he given you over?" He's the descendant of Abdul Qadir al-Jailani. Can you imagine Abdul Qadir al-Jailani? You read all the books. You read all the adhkar and what did he give you? And Shaykh Afifuddin has only ever given me one short dhikr to read. Very short dhikr. He says 100 times a day, if you can. Alhamdulillah. It's not too difficult. It takes me less than 5 minutes. So I can cope with that. Now, I'm fairly certain if I went back and asked him for something else, he'd probably say, "Just, that's enough." What does that mean? What does it mean? If he doesn't go over it again, he doesn't say, "Oh, this and this and this and this and this." He's just focused on that. That's enough. That's what he's saying, that's how important it is. And there are a number of hadith narrations of this, because he didn't just say it to one person. He said it to several people, and he gave the same advice. For example, in one narration, the person himself says, "Qultu ya Rasulullah, dallani ala amalin yadkhuluni al-jannah, wa la takthir alayya." Shuf al-adab. He says, somebody came to the Prophet ﷺ and says, "Give me something that will take me to the Jannah, and don't make it difficult." don't make it hard. Just give me something that's going to take me to Jannah, and don't make it difficult. Ajib. And the Prophet ﷺ says, "La taghdab." Don't be angry. Another narration, somebody came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, "Qultu ya Rasulullah, dallani ala amalin yadkhuluni al-jannah." Qala la taghdab tadkhul al-jannah. He says, "Don't be angry and you will go to the garden." So here the hadith is a little bit more, but it's still the same. He's just saying, don't be angry. But it's still the same advice. And then somebody else came and he says, "Tell me something, Ya Rasulullah, that will take me far from the anger of Allah." He says, "Don't be angry." You don't want Allah to be angry with you? Don't be angry with people. And then the one I like the best, subhanallah, somebody came to the Prophet ﷺ. He came straight to him and he said, "Ya Rasulullah, ayyi amal afdal?" What's the best action? He says, "Husnul khuluq." So he left. And then he came from the right, and he shouted from the right, Ya Rasulullah, ayy amal afdal. And you know the Prophet, among the characters of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam never spoke, but when he spoke to somebody, he would turn to them. So if somebody came in and asked him a question, he would turn his whole body to them and then speak to them. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was giving his dars. He's already told this man what the best action is. Husn al-khuluq, good character. So he comes in a few minutes later, and he comes in from this. Ya Rasulullah, ayy amal afdal. He turns. Husn al-khuluq. And then he leaves, and then he carries on with the dars. And then he comes in again, and he comes in from this side. Ya Rasulullah, ayy amal afdal. Husn al-khuluq. And then he continues. And then he goes again. And then he comes from behind. And again he says, Ya Rasulullah, ayy amal afdal. And then he turns and he says, Husn al-khuluq, wa la taghdab. Husn al-khuluq, wa la taghdab. And then he says again, Ya Rasulullah, awsini. Give me that advice again. He says, La taghdab. Give it again. La taghdab. Again. La taghdab. Again. La taghdab. And then he leaves. Now here, now you've got a context to this hadith. This is one version of the hadith. This person wanted, but also the Prophet ﷺ is actually teaching everybody what husn al-khuluq is. Because we've had all of these hadith about husn al-khuluq. You know, مَا شَيْءٍ أَثْقَلْ عَلَى الْمِيزَانَ مِنْ حُسْنِ الْخُلُقِ. There's nothing heavier on the scales than good character. So the heaviest thing that will happen is not the fasting and the prayer, is good character. So we know, there's so many hadith we've studied. We know all of this. We can write books about husn al-khuluq. But what's the reality? What does it actually mean? What does it mean? It's when somebody really, really irritates you. When somebody does really irritating things to you and you don't get angry. That's what the Prophet ﷺ was teaching everybody. La taghdab. Because the question was, what action is best? He says, husn al-khuluq. But husn al-khuluq means, la taghdab. La taghdab. La taghdab. And the Prophet ﷺ was right to get angry. Because this is out of order. And if you look at the full context of who that man was the same man that came into the mosque and urinated. You know, there was this story, there's many stories of this Arabi who did this, and this Arabi that did this, and this Arabi many of them are actually one person. And he urinated in the mosque, and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, just leave him. Clean it up, Umar. And there's so many lessons in this, because it reminds me of there's a guy, subhanAllah, I don't know how I attract these people, but there's one man I have a reputation in one place in East Africa where they call him Shaykh al-Majaneen. He's the Shaykh of the crazy people. And that's what they actually refer to me as, Shaykh al-Majaneen, because it appears that all of the crazy people love me. And they say that all of the crazy, everybody who's crazy, they fall in love with Abdul Aziz. And one of them, he was really crazy. You know, in East Africa they wear the izar, dhoti in Urdu, lungi in Bengali, sarong in Malay, kilt in Arab, in Scottish. But you know what I'm talking about. So you know what they look like. So he used to come into the mosque and he used to do headstands in the mimbar, in the mihrab. And he used to come and scream in the mosque and just like crazy behavior, like climb up, run up and down the mimbar. He used to just run up and down the mimbar. While the people are praying, he's running up and down the mimbar. And the only time he would ever be calm is when I was there. So if I wasn't in the mosque when he was there, they would call me straight away. You know, he'd be doing things and then they'd call me, go Abdul Aziz. I'd go, I said, Omar, oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It's okay. And then he'll come and he'll sit with me and then we'll listen to the dars. And then I'll take him home. And he just used to I don't know, I have this, but alhamdulillah, he used to have this affinity. And that's probably the only good thing that I can say I've got, because I didn't do anything in that community except for crazy people. But when I hear about this story, a lot of people who are like that don't get well treated in the community because they're just crazy. And I think if we did have a member here and somebody was running up and down the member, I don't think he'd last that long probably in this mosque he might actually, I think, inshallah. But a lot of places they wouldn't tolerate it. And that's one of the things that we need to learn about. Real test of husn al-khuluq is when you're being tested. It's not, we talked about Hassan. Alhamdulillah, you can see I love Hassan. You can see I love Yasin. For Yasin to come and visit me, it's not going to be difficult. That's not a difficult guest, is it? That's not, if he lives next door to me, that's not difficult. The real test is when somebody crazy comes to live with you. When somebody crazy comes to run up and down. When somebody crazy comes in the mosque. When somebody really challenges you. He comes and urinates in the mosque. That's where the real test is. And the Prophet ﷺ teaches us in the context of this, La taghdab. Don't become angry. And if you can control yourself in that situation as an individual, then you really have understood the previous hadith, which was your neighbours. The haqqul jar. If you've got really nice neighbours, it's really easy to be nice to them. The difficult thing is when you've got really horrible neighbours. Or when your guests just don't want to go home. Or when the person that has become Muslim is now a burden on the community. That's where the real test is. That's the real test. Not all of the easy bits. When somebody becomes Muslim and they contribute to the mosque, yeah, that's fine. But when they're drawing and pulling from the mosque, then you've got to start. And alhamdulillah, they say that I'm the Shaykh of the Majaneen because maybe I'm their Shaykh. The most majnoon of all of the Majaneen is their Shaykh, Raisahum. So perhaps I can speak to them more clearly because I speak their language. So alhamdulillah, this brother, I used to love him very, very much because literally, whenever he did something crazy in the mosque, they would always call me, and I'd sit, and he'd be like a child. Oh, Abdul Aziz, and he'd be calm and he'd be lovely. But you needed to be able to do that, and that's part of what the hadith is. La taghdab, la taghdab. And if you look at the context, la taghdab. But he's doing it himself by showing that that's what it means. Tayyib. So what is anger? What does it actually mean? What does it mean when you get angry? I mean, it's here, don't be angry. Does that mean you... Did I say I was going to quote Imam Shafi'i? I can find the quote. I mean, the meaning of what Imam Shafi'i said, I can't find the exact quote, but he said, that's it. وَلِذَلَكَ قَالَ الشَّافِعِي رَحِمَهُ اللَّهِ مَنِ اسْتَغْضَبْ فَلَمْ يَغْضَبْ فَهُوَ حِمَارٌ. He says that whoever is angered, somebody makes him angry and he doesn't get angry, he's a donkey. And another narration, he says that a man isn't a man if he can't get angry. So it kind of, and then you hear these hadith about Sayyidina Musa, for example. I mean, we were just talking about Laylatul Isra wal Mi'raj. If you read the hadith, the version in Tirmidhi, it talks about Sayyidina Musa. And the Prophet ﷺ hears somebody and he's angry with Allah. And he's shouting at Allah. And Jibreel says, he turns to the Prophet ﷺ, he says, who is that? He says, don't worry, it's just Musa. It's just Musa. So Al-Musa is described in the hadith, even in the Quran, he's described as being angry. So here, it kind of, I'm not quite sure, because it's kind of saying anger is good. But the hadith is telling us anger is not good. So what does it actually mean about to be angry?
It's not for the sake of Allah.
When it's not for the sake of Allah. So what exactly is anger then? If you think about The Prophet, for example, the Quran describes anger. It describes the believers أَشِدَّاهُمْ عَلَى الْكُفَّارِ رُحَمَاءَ بَيْنَهُم, that they are harsh on the disbelievers. So therefore anger is something which is being recommended here, and peaceful between them. And then the Quran says جَاهِدُ الْكُفَّارِ وَالْمُنَافِقِينَ وَاغْلُظْ عَلَيْهِمْ, fight the disbelievers and the hypocrites, and show anger towards them. So anger is something which is natural, and it's also something which is good in this sense. But of course this hadith is telling us not to get angry. So look at the origin of what anger is. Anger is a fire which grows within you. And that's why anger is said to be from shaitan. And that you can understand what the scholars say about anger is to move out of the balance of your mizaj. So anger is where you're in a state of balance. You're normally in a state of balance between hot and cold, so to speak, between dry and moist. This is what we call the balance of a human being. Is all of the elements of a human being are in balance. But when the fire grows within you, you become heated from within. And that's why the anger is always described as being connected to fire. It's also described as being connected to shaitan, who is made of fire. So when you think about it, when did he become fiery? When did he become angry? Shaitan, Iblis. When? What was the incident that took place where his anger became manifest? Because he wasn't always angry. There must have been something that made him angry. What was it? Who was it? Sayyidina Adam. And what did he say? خَلَقْتَنِي مِن نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتَهُ مِن طِينٍ. You created me out of fire, and you created him out of clay. In other words, I'm better than he is. So the motivation for most anger is pride. Is that you think you're better. There's something inside you which is driving you, which is satanic. And that quality within each one of us is something which grows. Now there are things that I should get angry about. And that's why Musa did get angry, because he had a right to get angry. He's got a lot to be proud of. He's a prophet. He's Kalimullah. He spoke to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He spoke to Allah in a way that nobody else spoke to him. So he can speak directly. So if, according to the hadith of Tirmidhi, that he was there getting angry with his Lord, he has a right that we don't have a right to. And that's why Jibreel says, don't worry, that's just Musa. And of course when he came back and he broke the tablets and he was angry with Bani Israel, they deserved it. He has a right to do that. So this anger is something which burns from within, which is why you're not really a man if you don't have that. Because if you don't have that as a man, then yeah, you can do what you like. Yeah, you can walk all over me. Yeah, just don't worry about my daughter, my wife. Yeah, you can just take them anywhere you like. Do what you like with them. That's not what a man is like. You hurt my daughter, I'll kill you. Yeah? You touch my wife, I'll kill you. That's anger, which is something which is burning inside me. And that's actually what you would call passion. Could you call that passion? That feeling, yeah, you touch my wife, I'll kill you. That's what anger really is. That's why the anger which is described in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, إِذَا جَعَلَ الَّذِينَ كَفْرُوا فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ الْحَمِيَّةِ حَمِيَّةُ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ, that He put in the hearts of these people the hamiyya, the passion, but the passion of jahiliyyah. So their passion, the thing that burns them up, that drives them to what they consider to be honor, is jahiliyyah. So much so that you touch my daughter, I will kill her out of disgust at what's happened to my family. That's hamiyatul jahiliyyah. That's anger, but it's not real correct anger. Anger is something which burns up inside you, which can be good, or in this case, al-hamiyatul jahiliyyah is that which drives people to what people are talking about as honor killings, which is not honor. So this anger is something which has to be understood where it came from. Okay, I think because the time is short, what is the cures for anger then? How do you get rid of anger? Al-wudu. That's one of the hadith. It refers to if you become angry, you should make wudu. Why is wudu important for putting out the fire of anger? Because it's fire. Water puts out fire. It's simple. That's why you should, because even another hadith is that you should drink water. When you're really angry, just drink water and you'll see that it starts to put out the fire. But it doesn't usually work sufficiently, so you go and make wudu. What's the other way of dealing with anger, according to the hadith?
Sit down.
Right, this is really interesting, because people say that if you're angry, you should sit down. But they don't understand what it actually means. It doesn't mean sit down on a chair. Because when I read it the first time, and I was taught, it says if you're angry and you're standing up, you should sit down. And if you're sitting down, then you should lie down. But that's not what the hadith actually means. The hadith means you should sit on the ground. If you're angry, you should sit on the ground. What did Shaitan say when he got angry for the first time? I just said it, didn't I?
So you made me out of fire.
خَلَقْتَنِي مِن نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتَهُ مِن teen. Teen is the ground. You created me out of fire and you created him out of the clay, out of the earth. So earth, what does earth mean? Earth means stability. Earth means stability. It's something which is stable. It's something which is firm. It doesn't fly. It doesn't spread. It's just firm. Whereas fire burns, it spreads, it moves, it overtakes things, it destroys. Earth doesn't do that. Earth is calm. Earth is solid. Earth is firm. So when you have fire growing inside you, this is something which is not from your real creation. Your real creation is to do with clay, stability, firmness. And if you want to get in touch with that, sit on the clay. Sit on the ground. Feel the ground beneath you. Think about the earth. Be in touch with your natural elements. And once you start to be in touch with your natural element, you start to be in control. Because the fire is now being put out. So, so that's the reality of getting of this anger is to understand what this anger is, and to realize that the Quran tells us to overcome our anger, كاظمين الغيظ, to overcome it. So being angry is natural, but to, as Muhammad has said, is to use that anger for good is what's important. Is to control that anger so it only goes for that which is beneficial, and not allow the anger to be burning within you. The Prophet ﷺ was described as getting angry, and he said when he became angry, nobody could stop him. Nobody could stop him. What that meant was he only became angry because there was something that was wrong that was done. And the only thing that could stop him was when somebody put right the thing that was wrong. And I'll finish with the words of Hasan al-Basri. He says, أَرْبَ مَنْ كُنَّ فِيهِ أَصْمَهُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ. He says, whoever has these 4 qualities, Allah will protect him from shaitan. So these are four things you must really make a note of. مَنْ مَلَكَ نَفْسُهُ عِنْدَ الرَّغْبَةِ وَالرَّهْبَةِ وَالشَّهْوَةِ وَالْغَضَبِ. Whoever can control himself under these circumstances. عند الرغبة, when he's when he wants something, he desires something, or he's hoping for something. والرهبة, when he's afraid. Shahwa, when he's in passion. Or ghadab, and anger. In other words, when he can control himself, when he needs something, he wants something, he can control something when he's scared, he can control himself when he's got passion, and he can control himself when he's got anger. If he can control himself in these 4 circumstances, he's going to be protected from shaitan. It kind of tells us that what happens between us is shaitan takes these are the qualities that we have inside us. And all of them are good things. Fear, we need. If a child has no fear, they're going to end up dead. They need to know that they can't jump out of windows. They watch the television and they see, Spider-Man climbing up the sides of the walls. Oh, I can do that. They'll be dead. They need to get some reality. They need control. So fear is necessary. They need to have anger. They need to have passion. They need to have desire. But they need to control it. I think if we gave 5 minutes break and then 30 minutes for the last hadith and questions, does that sound like a plan? Yeah, inshallah. Mabruk, alhamdulillah. Good. So, we'll see you soon, inshallah. Sorry? Tomorrow evening, yeah.
Just setting down. Okay.
Shukran.
Just ask one question.
No, it's the wrong one. So.
This one.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah wa ala alihi. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma alamtana innaka antal alim al-Hakim. There was a question during the break, which is that, if I remember it correctly, was that how do you get the balance when you see something which is very ugly or wrong, and you have anger about that, to try and get the balance correct in dealing with that, so that your anger is sufficient to want to change the situation and to try and change the situation, but not so much that it becomes excessive. And this is a difficult thing to balance, and that's why it's a very good question. I wanted to answer it in the wider context. It's in the wider context of a hadith which is also in this collection, which is Man ra'a minkum munkaran falyughayyiru biyadihi. Whoever sees something which is bad, he should change it with his hand. Wa in lam yastati' fabi lisanihi. And if he's not able to, then by his tongue. Wa in lam yastati' fabi qalbihi. Wa dhalika ad'afu al-iman. And if he's not able to do it with his tongue, then he should do it with his heart, and that is the weakest form of iman. And what's meant by iman here is what we were talking about earlier, is that Iman implies action as a fruit of faith. So that's when the Quran, when the Hadith says Al-Iman yazidu wa yanqusu, Iman increases and decreases. It doesn't mean the actual faith increases and decreases, because I believe in one God. Doesn't mean tomorrow I believe in two gods because it's gone up. It's still one God I believe in. It's the same belief. The belief is the same, but the fruit of the belief changes. The fruit of the belief tomorrow, the belief in one God, means that I'm firm. It means that nothing can harm me. It means that no matter what haram is going around me, it doesn't affect me. But then the next day, going to work, a big fitna. You know why? I've still got the same belief in Allah. But how come the fitna at work affected me? It's because my iman has gone down. Not because my faith has gone down, but the fruit of the faith has gone down, the consequences of the faith. So that's what's meant by وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. That is the weakest form of iman. It means that has the least fruit, in the sense that it doesn't have the direct physical change. If you see something wrong and you can change it with your hand, don't do that. Then you should. But this is only for the people who have power. The hadith, the first part of the hadith, applies to those people who have control, who have the ability to change things with their hands, who are the government. So if you're a police officer and you see somebody doing something bad, it's okay, it's only shoplifting. Don't worry about that. You can beat him up. I don't like him either. This is not. You've got a duty. If you see something wrong, you're a policeman. You don't have a choice in this matter. The Khalifa cannot allow haram to go on. It's his role to change it, even if he has to kill. That's what the Khalifa is there. The Khalifa has to establish justice for the community. So this is extreme. So when it says changing things, but even, this actually leads into the hadith, even in that extreme situation, is that it should be based on what is right and what is wrong. And then the attitude that when the Prophet ﷺ, for example, when he, going back to the hadith that we ended with last time, when he put to death this lady, or this lady was put to death on his instruction, she came to him and she asked to be put to death. And he said, no, go away, you're pregnant. She came back after the baby, I'm no longer pregnant. He says, go away, you're a mother. And he came back and says, he kept trying to get rid of her so that he didn't have to impose the death penalty on her. But she insisted and insisted and insisted, till eventually he had no choice but to implement the punishment. The punishment was implemented, and then he said, does anybody want to see a woman from the people of Jannah? For surely that was one of them. So even in implementing the highest possible penalty, which is the death penalty, there was still rahmah, there was still love. Even in the anger of protecting the society, it didn't go to the extreme. So, and he never hated the lady. He still had love for the lady. He still had compassion for this lady, even in this highest extreme situation. So therefore, when you're angry with somebody, Your anger should be such that the anger is governed by the correct behavior of that anger and not affecting your heart. So even when you're angry with somebody, for example, like I said, I seem to attract some interesting people, and some people ask me, how can you cope with drug addicts, and how can you sit with people that are drunk and take drugs? And I don't have a problem. A lot of the time, I don't have a problem. Why? Because I don't hate any of them. Most of the people that I've sat with who have these problems, every single drug addict that I've met and I've worked with or been with, professionally or within Islamic context, I've only had good feeling towards, because I know that not one of them, in my experience so far, has chosen, so to speak, this path. It's just society has put them in this position. Life has treated them, life has got them to this point in their life where they had no way out of it except this is the way that they're dealing with life. So they're dealing with life in that way, and I don't feel angry about them. It doesn't block me from, but I do have anger about what's happened. But the anger isn't at them. The anger is at the drug taking. And the same with somebody asked me about, I used to work in an area where there was a lot of prostitutes, who were all drug addicts who turned to prostitution. And I used to speak quite highly of these ladies because I saw them in a different context. I saw them as mothers of children who I was working with. So I was working with the kids, but then obviously I need to get to know the mothers to help the kids. So I would work with the mothers, and somebody used to say, don't you find it? I said, no, she's actually a really good mother. She's actually a really nice lady. Thinking, people look, you like all these prostitutes, and they start thinking, well, what exactly is going on here? The manager of the, it's like, but the reality was that not one of those women I thought was a bad woman, because almost all of the women that were in prostitution, in fact every single one of them, was only doing it because of their addiction, and that most of them were only addicted because they were in a bad situation in their lives. There's something bad had happened to them that this was their way out. So I hated what they were doing. It was horrible, but I didn't put the blame on them because I could detach them as a human being from the act, and that's where the difficulty in most people have, is they can't detach the act from the person. Now I've been blessed that I can detach that because I've maybe got more experience in dealing with people. In most cases I can detach that, and you need to strive to try and do that so that you become angry, but you don't become angry at that person. And generally I don't become angry about things like that. That doesn't kind of upset me at all, because maybe I just become, but there are other things that do make me angry. So that's the answer to that question, is that you should try to become angry or limit your anger to the act and not take it out on the person. Because as soon as you, for example, I'm struggling with some anger I have with one particular prisoner. His offence I just can't get out of my mind. I was just talking with Sidi Zubair this morning, because he works with prisoners as well, and I'm trying to get some advice from him because I'm really struggling. This person, his crime stops me from loving him as a brother, and I can't deal with it. I can't treat him as my brother as I treat you as my brother, and he's probably the only criminal that I've worked with, and I've worked with some really serious. I mean, one guy had killed 4 people, 4 times murderer, and I had no problem at all with him. In my heart, I had no anger towards him. I was angry about he killed people, but I could detach those murders from that person that was in front. But this guy, I can't detach, and I'm struggling. So that's my striving. I need to get over that somehow. Inshallah, make dua that I can do it, and you need to do it as well with your anger towards this. And if you can't do that, you can't be effective in da'wah. And I can't be effective with this guy. I can't deal with it. I'm no use to him at all. Because it's superficial. I'm being nice to him. But I'm being nice because it's husn al-khuluq. Allah told you to be nice. I'm not doing it because I'm nice. It's not real. It's false. And I got to work on that. So that's what we need to strive. Inshallah, perhaps Allah will reward me for trying to be nice. Make dua for me. Okay, so that kind of leads into the next hadith, actually, which is an Abi Ya'la Shaddad ibn Aus radiyallahu ta'ala anhu and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, inna Allah kataba al-ihsan ala kulli shay'in. Allah has written ihsan ala kulli shay, has written excellence upon everything. Let's take it one word at a time. What does written mean? Inshallah, in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to be fasting. Why? Kutiba alaykum as-siyam. It has been written for you to fast. So written here means that it has been prescribed. Inna salata kana ala al-mu'minina kitaban mawqutan. It has been written, the prayer has been written on specific times. You know, alhamdulillah, Aziz says there's no prayer in the lesson. It's not been written. I love his emails. Yeah, and it's true. It's not been written into the lesson program. Why? Because Allah didn't write it. So why should Aziz write it into the program? You know, you're going to make something up? No, it's not. The prayer has been written. So written is meaning prescribed. And the Prophet ﷺ, again, when he's referring to the prayer at night in Ramadan, he says, "Inni khushitu an yuktab alaykum," that I feared that it would be written for you. What does that mean? He thought it would become fard. He feared that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would make the night prayer in the Ramadan, the Taraweeh prayer, would become a fard upon you. So the word kataba has this meaning. And then the next word, al-ihsan. Ihsan we've already talked about in the very early hadith about the Prophet ﷺ was asked, "Akhbirni anil ihsan." Tell me about ihsan. What was the answer? أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. To worship Allah as if you can see Him, and if you can't see Him, know that He can see you. So it's to be aware of what you're doing. So that's also what this fast is about. كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. It's been written for you. Why? So that you can become aware of who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. To become aware of who you are, and you can have the relationship which is correct. So ihsan is to have this excellence in everything. And that's why, going back to what Umar ibn Khattab had said, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he says, "Inna Allah ya'muru bil adl wal ihsan." Allah has ordered you to be just and to do good, to excel. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَحْسِنُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Excel in everything that you do, for surely Allah loves those who excel. So here, the first two key words in this hadith is كَتَبَ عَلَيْكُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَتَبَ الْإِحْسَانَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. In every single thing. And that's the essence of this hadith. It tells you, you have to do good. That's what the hadith is about. Some people look at the rest of the hadith and think that that's what's important. It's not. This is the important part of the hadith. The rest explains it. You have to be good in everything. That's what the hadith is telling you. That's what the hadith, in everything. So if you do something good, if you're doing something, don't do it half-heartedly. You probably guessed that I don't consider music to be haram. Now, if you differ in opinion, that's fine, but I don't. This is my opinion. I don't consider to be music haram. Within constraints, I consider it to be permissible. And likewise, my Shaykh, Habib Ahmad Mashur, he also considered it to be permissible, but he didn't make it an issue. He never talked really publicly about it. But one of his grandsons had bought a jihaz keyboard. He'd bought a keyboard and was playing keyboard secretly. So his father was thinking, "Oh, my son, this is Habib's son. is thinking about his grandson, that this teenage boy, 19 years old, he's gone astray. You know, he's bought a keyboard. Not that he's left Islam or anything like that. He just bought it. He's into music. So he says, please, Habib, can you do something about your grandson? Do something about my son. He called him. He called his son. So, you have a keyboard, huh? Can I just tell you, if you're going to play keyboards, make sure you do it well. Don't, practice properly. Don't just do it little bit. If you're going to play keyboards, don't waste be good. And the son was thinking, no, I brought my son, your grandson here for you to tell him, go back on Islam, be firm in the deen, and don't go astray. He says, no, practice. And then he says, I think it's better to practice on Wednesdays. And I said, no, Habib, don't tell him that. No, Wednesday, practice Wednesdays. And you should bring, that Englishman, Abdul Aziz, get him to come with you. Practice with him. I think he plays guitar. I think, get Abdul Aziz. And your other cousin, Said Omar, he should come as well. He has a beautiful voice. And I think once a month, I think you should come and perform with me. But practice properly. So basically, Habib Ahmad Mashur bin Tal Haddad had set up a band. But there was so much wisdom in this. His words were, do it well. And he said, meet on a Wednesday. I don't know if you know what it's like in Jeddah, but football night is Wednesday night. They don't play on Saturdays. They play on Wednesdays. He told us to meet on Wednesdays because he knew that they'd be meeting on Wednesday anyway. And instead of just sitting and watching football, the guys would come, and he told them to practice the keyboards. And he told him to come with Abdul Aziz and with Sayyid Umar bin Hamid. So what were they going to practice on the keyboards? Nasheed. They were going to practice the traditional music. And they started to practice, and he said, I'd like to hear you every once in a while. Maybe once a month you should come. So obviously we're going to perform in front of Al-Habib Ahmad Mashur bin Tal Haddad. What are we going to perform in front of him? We're going to perform the qasaid of his great-grandfather, Imam al-Haddad. So every Wednesday we'd meet up, watch the football, and then we'd practice qasidas. And we'd learn the qasidas of Imam al-Haddad. So the qasidas that we learnt were all through Al-Habib telling his grandson to play the keyboards well. And he did. He started to play really well. And it actually turned out to be it was a decent band actually. And the thing about it was that other people used to come and they used to say, oh, you play music, go to Firqat al-Haddad. And if you translate that means, if you translate that literally means the Haddad band. You should go to the Haddad band. And so people would come from East Africa, from Malaysia, from Indonesia, and they say, where are the guys that play music? Oh, Firqat al-Haddad. And that's Abdul Aziz, Sayyid Umar bin Hamid, Sayyid Hassan, Sayyid Hussein, and all of these ulama. I mean, not me, the other guys were real ulama. And these people were we kind of grew up. And he didn't say, haram, haram. He says, do it well. He says, if you're going to do something well. And somebody, it's been a long time since Shaykh Afifi, the great Malaysian scholar. SubhanAllah, once he was at Nasruddin's house. Nasruddin's probably going to kill me for telling you this. But one day, please don't tell him. One day, Shaykh Afifi was living at the state, and he got up and he went downstairs and he started playing the piano. This is like before Fajr time. He's sitting and playing classical piano. And he woke the family up. And then Shaykh Afifi just says, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to wake you all up. I just saw this piano and I touched it and it's just so in tune. It was just such a perfect, the tuning of the piano was just so beautiful. I just thought I had to play and I just couldn't help myself. And it's a shit. He's like one of the greatest fuqaha on this planet. He's a real great scholar. And but what did he say? It was just so in tune. So if you're going to do something, do it well. Somebody asked me also, I think it's maybe even a sister from here, I can't remember now, was asking about psychology. Is it haram to study psychology? And I said, no, it's not haram to study psychology per se. But if you are going to study psychology, do it well. Don't just go half-heartedly, oh, a bit of this, a bit of that. Do it properly, get deep into it so you excel, so you understand psychology, so you can take it apart, so you can understand that Jung had said this, whereas Freud had said this, and Freud was talking nonsense. And you need to get to that point that Freud, and you need to understand how he got it wrong, and why he got it wrong. What was the context of his mistakes, and why did he do that? And what effect did that have on later psychologists? So if you're going to study, don't just do it like this, do it properly. So that's what the hadith is about. If you're going to do something, do it well. If you're going to play football, do it properly. Excel. Like I remember, Nicholas Anelka, after he became Muslim, he got, he kept his Islam, he didn't make his Islam public, he was just Muslim. No big deal. He didn't drink, he didn't sleep around, and he didn't take drugs. That's what Muslims are like. So people thought he was a bit weird, but as a footballer, he was still good. And when it came to Ramadan, then he got a criticism from his manager. You can't fast. And he didn't care. What did he do? He employed a dietitian. He employed about 5 people to get him through the Ramadan, so that he knew his training program he could fast the full day. He'd get the right calorie intake, he'd get the right food, he'd get it at the right time, he'd train at the right time, he'd pray at the right time, everything was worked out minute by minute. And he employed 5 people, and he had a great month. In terms of his football, he actually played better in Ramadan than he played in any other month. Why? Because he's good. He's a good player. So this is what's required. If you're gonna be a footballer, just be a good footballer. If you're going to be a musician, be a good musician. If you're going to be a psychologist, be a good psychologist. If you're going to be a mother, be a good mother. A sister came the other day to see us, and I knew her before she before she married my friend. And alhamdulillah, I used to look up to her. She was my friend's sister. And alhamdulillah, we went on Umrah together, and I saw her within the context of the family. And I always admired her. And she was a doctor. And a couple of times while I was on the Umrah with her, she'd noticed something about my health, and she'd tell her brother, go and ask Abdul Aziz this, or go and take medicine to Abdul Aziz, see if he needs this. And I thought, this girl knows her stuff. She's a really good doctor. She can read things that other people can't read. And she prescribes in such a way that she understands. And I had this respect for her. And now seeing her with now 2 kids, she's not a doctor anymore. She's just a good mother. And subhanAllah, you just think, she was a great doctor, and now she's a great mother. And it doesn't, she's not changed. She's still the same person she was. So the hadith, the point of the hadith, oh, I didn't see you there. But that's the point of the hadith, is if you're going to do something, excel. And then it goes on finally to talk about if you're going to, even in killing. Why does it mention killing specifically? Because you all have animal within you. Each one of us has an animal part to us. And that animal part of us, if that overtakes you, you become more animal. You become an animal. Yes? Is that right? You become a dungar. Yes? And there are people that become dungar. Is that right? Now, to protect yourself from becoming a dungar, you need to excel. But even if you go to the most animalistic thing that you can do, the most animalistic thing you can do is kill another animal. That's what animals do. They kill each other for food. So if you're going to kill, even in this most animalistic thing, there are still rules. And the killing here, even in jihad, this is something we need to go to, because the Quran actually tells you how to kill in jihad. It doesn't say make jihad. In the Quran, it doesn't just say go out and kill. It actually describes, فَإِذَا لَقَيْتُمُ الَّذِينَ كَفْرُوا فَضَرْبَ الرِّقَابِ. When you meet them, strike their necks. It actually gives you instructions on how to fight. And when, you know that we're going to be talking about the Battle of Badr in the month of Ramadan. You know the Battle of Badr, the great thing about the Battle of Badr is the angels came down and descended. Among them was Sayyidina Jibreel. And Sayyidina Jibril had destroyed nations before that. He destroyed the people of Ad. He destroyed the people of Thamud. He destroyed the people of Lut. You know, he destroyed people. Or he came to destroy them. He's not your nice, friendly neighborhood angel. He comes and he just picks up a whole town and goes, bang, finished. He just gives them one shout and everybody dies. And the angel Jibril came down to fight at the Battle of Badr. Oh my God. I mean, what's he going to do? I mean, he just needs to blow and they're all dead. But instead of doing that, he actually asks, how should I fight? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers, سألقي في قلوب الذين كفروا الرعب فاضربوا فوق الأعناق واضربوا منهم كل بنان. He says you should instill fear in them and you should strike at their necks and hit their fingers. So Jibril did it. He just does what he's told. He didn't need to do any of that. Why does he need to strike somebody's neck when he can just blow? It's because there's a methodology in everything, even in jihad. And that's why people misunderstand what jihad is about. Because the Prophet ﷺ says, he says, for example, he mentions, this is a beautiful, لا تمثل ولا تقتلوا وليدا. He says that you shouldn't make statues and you shouldn't kill children. Ajib. I mean, how diverse a hadith is this? But what he's meaning, it relates to this hadith. Whatever you do, you should excel in it. Excel in jihad is that it becomes haram to harm innocents within the jihad. Within the jihad, there are rules, even in jihad. Even in killing an animal, not killing a human, which we've got rules for, which people seem to forget. They think that jihad is just going and blowing people up. That's not jihad, that's murder. That's murder. The Quran is specific about methodology. It's specific about the rules. Even in killing an animal. And there are many, many hadith about the adab, and I think because the time is up, I'm just going to give you some of them, just to talk about what it's like to kill, what the adab of killing an animal is. First of all, the sheep, if you have a sheep, you should not torture it. It's haram to torture animals in any way. The Prophet ﷺ said that somebody that kills animals for sport, it's forbidden. He said anybody that, for example, kills ants, he says you're not allowed to kill ants using fire. Because the only one that can punish with fire is Allah. So don't punish using fire. So fire isn't a method that you can use in killing animals. People use it in war and they call it jihad. It's not allowed even to kill ants. That you're not allowed to kill animals for sport. You're not allowed to torment animals. One of the practices, they used to tie up chickens and throw things at them, to stone chickens before they killed them. The Prophet ﷺ forbade it completely. In fact, when you take a sheep, you should give it water before you kill it. You should make sure it's calm before you kill it. You should turn all the other animals away from the one that's being killed, so nobody witnesses another animal being killed. You should kill, as the hadith says, with the sharpest possible knife, and the animal should not see the knife. You should turn the animal away so that when you cut, the animal doesn't see the knife. All of these are the adab of killing the animal, and you should do it as quickly as possible. So if this is the case, in the most basic of things, the most animalistic of things, which is killing, then what's it like in dealing with your neighbor, dealing with your wife, dealing with your children? If you have to be like this with an animal, what are we like as human beings? That's what the hadith is about. It's not about slaughter. It's about you as a person. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us real human beings, real humans that have these qualities, that have the husn al-khuluq, have the kind of qualities that has been described in this hadith, that have the ability to control our anger, have the ability to control our nafs, having from when we have shahwa, passion, when we have raghba, when we have rahba, fear, that we direct our emotions in the correct way, that we have a society which is built on on the correct emotions and the correct way of dealing with each other, that we look after each other, that our community gets stronger and stronger, that we protect each other and we look after each other and we love each other, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descends rahmah into this community, descends it upon this mosque and everybody that comes into this mosque, that He protects everybody in the city from the evil of the dunya, that He takes all of those people that have gone astray and He brings them back raddan jamilan, in a beautiful way, that He makes us the means by which the people that have gone astray come back to the deen, that He takes those people that have got anger and unhappiness in their lives, that we bring them happiness and peace, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us peace and happiness in our lives and in the lives of our children, and make our children qurratul ayn, the sweetness of our eyes, so that we become peaceful and happy whenever we see our children, and that our children grow up safe and protected from this dunya, protected from the evils of this world, and that they grow up to be strong and healthy and contributing to the society and taking the husn khuluq to the next generation. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa sahbihi wasallam. Finally, I ask people to forgive me if I said anything out of order, if I said anything to hurt anybody, or that my teasing or joking was excessive, and if anybody did take any offence at what I've said, please forgive me. You know, I don't mean any harm to anybody. Jazakumullah khairan, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. A special dua as well for those people that are sick, that anyone that's ill, بنيت الشفاء ودفع البلاء وقرب إلى الله اللهم اشف مرضانا وعافي مبتلانا وارحم موتانا وارحم موتانا وأصلح أحيانا وصلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما.